Chapter I Prologue Izuku Midoriya's Origins. Inko Midoriya was not a great person. She would never claim to be a great hero, but she was certainly a great mother. She always strove to be the strongest pillar of love, care, and support that her darling little Izuku could ever need. So, when she found out earlier today that her little bundle of joy Izuku was quirkless, she was concerned for his well-being. Izuku had been diagnosed as quirkless earlier that day. She had her suspicions about the diagnosis primarily because she had been a late bloomer and also the circumstances surrounding her quirk also. The idea of judging potential quirk status on the presence of a toe joint was always ridiculous to her. Regardless, her son was crushed, and the ride home was nothing short of sad and depressing. Izuku went to his room, and Inko gave him the space he needed. After a little while, she went to his room to check on him, and her heart constricted at the sight. Izuku was watching his favorite video of his idol, All Might, rescuing dozens of civilians from a burning building with a literal smile on his face. It was a kind of smile that she knew from experience was fake, but her son didn't know that. All he saw was the immutable confidence of an unstoppable and unwavering paragon. But what Inko saw was a god amongst men who had set a gold standard of heroics that, frankly, no one could reach. No, she wasn't going to think about that again. Her son needed her, and she had to be there for him. Hearing her come in, he looked back at her with tears threatening to spill from his eyes. In a tone that was much too sad for any child, he asked, "Can I be a hero, too?" while pointing to All Might on the computer screen. How was she going to tell her son that she couldn't support him? How was she going to explain to her son that she didn't believe that he could, not because he was quirkless, but because she didn't believe in heroics anymore? How could she properly articulate that heroics are nothing but rotten eggs coated in diamonds? How could she tell him that she didn't want him to be a hero because she had seen the worst heroics had to offer? How could she tell him that heroics are nothing but a glamorized job run by a bunch of staunch idiots? She looked at him and sighed. This is a decision she would either regret or look back on fondly, but oh well, it was now or never. She quickly made her way to her son and wrapped him in a warm embrace, running her hand through the soft, wild curls that she loved so much while whispering quiet assurances to him. "Izuku, look at me," she softly began, wiping away the tears from his face with her thumb when he complied. "You are a courageous, kind, and brilliant boy with a heart for helping everyone in need. I truly believe that you could become a hero." Izuku looked at her with a hopeful but suspicious gaze. He looked like he truly wanted to believe her, but something was holding him back. "There's a but to this, isn't there?" And he figured it out. Frankly, she both hated and loved how unnaturally smart Izuku was at just age 4. He was smarter than most kids his age, and she wouldn't be the first or last to comment on it. Izuku also had enhanced perception exceeding that a 4-year-old kid should have, and she knew he inherited it from her. She vaguely remembered her biological mother could use the same abilities as her, but she disguised her quirk as float, while she did know her real quirk was genetic and only manifested under certain conditions, which also added to her doubts about Izuku's quirkless status. She could feel herself getting headaches from thinking about quirk science. Maybe she would research more into the subject when she has the time. She felt Izuku's hand softly poking her cheek, bringing her out of her mental ramblings. She sheepishly grimaced knowing that she had spaced out. At least it wasn't as bad as her husband Hisashi, who tended to mumble his thoughts out loud. She looked up and saw her son staring at her with more patience than any kid his age should have. Smiling at him, she picked him up and carried him out of his room. Izuku, while confused, didn't say anything even as she carried him to her room and sat him down. Inko sat him down on her bed and walked towards her closet. She reached for the door and hesitated, having second thoughts about going through with her plan. She couldn't have any second thoughts. She was doing this, and she was going to see it through. Pushing forward, she slid open her closet door and moved the hanging clothes to the side before reaching for the wall behind them and pushing on a secret panel. Part of the wall caved in and revealed another compartment within, and she stepped to the side to show Izuku an old hero costume hanging in the space where the wall previously stood. It was a light green spandex suit with white lines on each side, a red utility belt, red combat boots, a respirator mask, and complete white gauntlets that stretched up to the forearms of the suit. She turned to her starstruck son who was looking at the costume with a mix of incredulity and wonder. She smiled sadly as his eyes finally fixed on her. You're a pro hero, but I've never seen you go on patrol. Are you an underground hero? How do you fight criminals? You have such a fantastic quirk, so I suppose it does make sense. Even if you couldn't move people with your quirk, you could easily attract and manipulate small, heavy objects around to direct them in combat or rescue operations. Izuku breathed. She instructed with a more genuine smile. When he stopped his mutter spree, she sat down on the bed next to him and readied herself for the conversation that she never wanted to have. To answer your questions, yes, I was a pro hero. I was underground, so I wasn't too popular with the general public, but I made a decent name for myself in underground circles. And I'm going to let you in on a generational secret. My quirk isn't attraction to small objects, it's called space manipulation. Whoa, that's even cooler with your quirk. You could wait. Why did you hide your true quirk from everyone? IOL. She took a deep breath before opening her eyes and removing her contact lenses, which she wore over her eyes, revealing bright green eyes that shone like emerald stones. Izuku, she began, her voice serious and lacking the motherly affection it usually had. There was once a powerful villain with the power to steal quirks, and he had been after my bloodline for years. And yes, my quirk is genetic, which means it most probably was passed down to you, which is why I have my reservations about you being quirkless. I'm showing and telling you all of this to answer your question from earlier. I truly do believe that you can become a hero. But I don't think you can become a hero like All Might. She could see the pain and hurt in his eyes before they gave way to a pleading ferocity. But All Might is the greatest hero. That's mostly true, she began, and that's part of the problem. All Might is like a god amongst men. He sets an impeccable standard for heroes everywhere, one that most people may not be able to attain because they're just not as absurdly powerful as him. Are you following so far? At his nod, she continued, All Might can do things that most heroes could only dream of doing, and that's even with quirks of their own. For now, you don't have one of your own, and that will make your journey to becoming a hero significantly harder. You will have to work at least twice as hard as everyone else just to catch up with them, and even then, you may only receive less than half of the credit when the job is done. Inko wasn't going to pretend that Izuku wouldn't face any discrimination for being quirkless. It was something that he was better off knowing right away than finding out later in a less favorable manner. She paused to ensure that he was still paying attention. When she confirmed that he was, she pressed on. It will not be an easy task, Izuku. You will have to dedicate a sizable portion of your time and energy to training and preparing for this, both physically and mentally. There's also no real guarantee that it will work out, and that's even with a quirk. She sighed. There's the issue in the room that you currently don't have a quirk, and while that may seem like a death sentence, it isn't in the grand scheme. Not everyone has a combat-applicable quirk, so those heroes that don't must work around that limitation to keep up with other heroes that do, as well as villains with powerful and dangerous quirks. You'll need to know how to defend yourself, how to combat any potential enemy, how to prepare for any and every situation, and when to take a step back and call for help. Luckily for you, your mother happens to be a retired pro living with you in your home, and will happily train you to be the first and best quirkless goddamn hero this city has ever seen. She knew she made the right decision as she watched Izuku's hope return and the light in his eyes brighten in real time. Are you ready for the sheer amount of hard work that you will have to put in to become a hero with or without a quirk? She asked her son with a deadly serious tone before kneeling to directly meet his gaze. It's okay to say no, honey. No matter what you do, no matter what you decide on, no matter what path you take, I will always love you and be in your corner to the very end. You have my unconditional support, always. Izuku teared up again at the declaration, but they weren't pained tears like they were before. Inko could see a steely determination form from the hope in those watery eyes of his, and she had all the answers she needed. She knew that she would soon have to test his resolve, but for now, she knew she made the right decision. Thank you, Mom, he muttered. Of course, my little Izu, she responded. She felt him go still in her embrace for a moment before pulling away to gaze curiously at her. But Mom, you said I don't currently have a quirk, as if it might change. Do you think that might change soon? Well, it's possible that you're a late bloomer like me or that you have a quirk that's more latent than other quirks. I'm sure you've noticed that you're considerably smarter than everyone around you at your preschool. And your situation isn't hopeless because I didn't manifest my quirk till I was 6 years old. And he had noticed if the way his eyes suspiciously could not meet hers in embarrassment was any indication. The other kids just call me weird. I noticed that I sometimes make the adults uncomfortable when I'm around them. I just figured I was ahead because I knew how to use the computer and internet early. Anyway, she continued, I'll have to do a bit more research on quirk science and investigate some things in our family before I can give you a definitive answer. For now, I'll handle your training without any quirks in mind. Okay, Mom, he replied before his eyes lit up again. Why did you retire, anyway? She should have expected that question. She tried to brush over the fact that she no longer did hero work and put the idea of her training him into his head as quickly as possible so that he'd focus on the training and not the other details. But she should have known better. Her son wouldn't just miss details like that. Unfortunately, she'd be sure to immerse him in the world of informatics and investigation as part of his training. Another time, sweetie, she said with a grimace. How about I make you some katsudon to celebrate the start of your training? Izuku's eyes narrowed at her, but he reluctantly accepted the bribe to drop the subject, at least for now. She knew she wouldn't get off that easily, though. She'd have to come clean about everything sooner or later on, but she would hold out for as long as she could until he was old enough to handle it. For now, she'd sharpen him into a blade ready to deal with the most dangerous parts of heroics, both villain and hero alike. Chapter 2. The Beginning. It is not clear when it began, but people speculate it has been nearly 2 centuries since that day. The day when the whole world was taken aback by the news of the birth of a mysterious luminous baby in a city in China. The news had been circulated throughout the world, and scientists and researchers from all over the world began researching this peculiar phenomenon that had suddenly occurred in the world. After several experiments were done on the samples taken from the baby, scientists found a peculiar strand of DNA that had been present in the cellular structure of the baby. Studying it further, scientists were able to discover that the origination of this phenomenon was due to that DNA strand. Soon after, several cases of people unlocking weird abilities began making headlines and were constantly being reported from various parts of the world. Some people could create ice blocks to cover their hands. People could move objects telepathically and do other weird things. Scientists began researching further in this new phenomenon, and surely, each of these people had that unique strand that was traced as the origin of all these weird abilities. But as time progressed, extraordinary things became ordinary. And these new abilities were given the name of quirks. However, these abilities opened up the gates for newer possibilities. Dreams became a reality. And soon enough, movies became real. With the emergence of quirks, the order and law enforced by the governments of the world began falling. There was a sudden increase in the number of criminals who were termed as villains. To deal with this new threat, governments all around the world decided to form their group of people. A group that would combat these villains to maintain order and peace. A group that would work to deliver justice to all those who were wronged. A group of heroes. From that group emerged many who were considered as the epitome of the hero society. However, amongst all of them stood one person who became this symbol of peace. Was none other than All Might. But this isn't his story. It's the story of Izuku Midoriya. 10. Izuku felt nothing but pain. The pain was the thing he had become most familiar with over the months. For over a year, Izuku's mother had, in no uncertain terms, beaten the dog's head out of him 5 days out of the week. He had undergone ruthless physical training in combat, stealth, cardio, weight training, a bit of gymnastics, and even parkour for when it would inevitably become necessary. And Izuku loved and hated every minute of it. At age 4, Izuku started with something relatively light, dodge training. Inko called in a favor that an old associate from her time as a pro owed her, and she managed to secure a small training room in the city as well as a frightening amount of small, rubber balls. Izuku's objective was simple: dodge the oncoming projectiles that his mother would launch at him with an unsettling grin. It seemed simple enough until he realized that his mother, even with her eyes closed, had an impeccable aim and the arm of a major league pitcher. And later, to make things worse, she had him dodge blindfolded. What she did not tell him was that she'd be yoinking the balls behind him back into her grasp with her quirk, and he'd have to dodge those, too. It doubled as training in situational awareness. At the young age of 5, Izuku learned firsthand an unpleasant experience and what it meant to be quirkless regardless of his suspicions of the accuracy of his status. This lesson came in the form of 2 distinct incidents happening on the same day, one being more pleasant than the other. The first incident began with a regular day at school for Izuku. That was, if regular involved him jumping in front of his sorta friend, Katsuki Bakugo, before the explosive blonde could continue tormenting another boy cowering on the ground. Izuku would have liked to believe that it wasn't a regular occurrence, but… "The hell are you doing, Deku?" The ash blonde growled at him with eyes filled with more annoyance than anger. "You can't just beat people down like this, Kaken." Izuku responded with a tinge of exasperation. "You've made your point already, whatever point that even was, to begin with." That, in Izuku's estimation, may not have been the right thing to say. "Oh," Bakugo growled in a low, dangerous tone. "You think you're better than me, huh? What the hell can you even do about it, you quirkless Deku?" Izuku didn't particularly want this to end in violence, but he knew that it was becoming unavoidable. A glance around showed that they were beginning to attract a crowd of other students, and he saw a teacher wander over to see what the ruckus was about. By then, the kid who was previously cowering had long since made his escape, while Bakugo and company were distracted, so all the teacher saw was Bakugo and 2 others surrounding the unsettling kid who didn't have a quirk. So, he did what any other reasonable adult would do in that situation. He turned around and walked away. That's gotta be illegal, right? Izuku thought with a deadpan frown. He didn't dwell on it, however, as he had a more pressing issue to deal with in the form of a pissed-off Bakugo and his 2 lackeys making their way toward him. He did not want to fight them, but it seemed inevitable. He just hoped his mother wouldn't be too upset with him. "If I have to stop you myself, then that's exactly what I'll do," he said with a measure of conviction that took Bakugo slightly aback. It's what a hero would do. And that, Izuku learned, was not the right thing to say. "You looking down on me, you shitty, worthless nerd?" Bakugo almost screamed. "Guess I'll have to finally put you in your place and remind you of the goddamn pebble you are." "I can't do that, Kaken. I can't let you bully him like that," the green-haired boy said as he stood in front of the boy. The boy could feel Bakugo's pissed-off aura, but stood his ground nonetheless. "Oi, Deku, are you going to take the beating for him?" One of the 2 lackeys that followed Bakugo around asked smugly. "Yes, because that is what anyone would do," the green-haired boy said. He glanced around and saw most people cheering him on. The spiky blonde, Bakugo, growled in anger. "Oi, you shitty nerd, are you still going on about being a hero?" Small sparks started emerging from his hands. Izuku would be lying if he said he wasn't intimidated by Bakugo, but he still held his ground. "Yes, I want to be a hero." Bakugo began laughing mockingly. "As if a quirkless nobody like you can become a hero." The blonde then glanced at the greenette and smirked. "Look behind you, Deku. That boy you wanted to save has already run away." Izuku turned his head and indeed found that the boy had run away. He turned his head to look at Bakugo, who was smirking menacingly at him. "Maybe you need a little reminder of your place, shitty Deku." The blonde growled as small explosions went off in his hands. The green-haired boy closed his eyes and prepared himself for the attack. It wasn't something new to him. After all, this was what happened all the time. Because he was quirkless, every time Bakugo and his lackeys would try to beat him or bully him, the teachers would just turn a blind eye to that, as if what was happening did not concern them in any way, as if Izuku was not their problem in any way. And so, the green-haired little boy watched on as Bakugo charged at him with many explosions sparking in his palms, but when Izuku steadied himself to dodge, he saw Bakugo floating midair. He was just confused and decided to risk getting himself burnt just to see what the heck was going on, and so he waited. And waited. And waited a little more. But nothing happened. He did not feel any pain. Had he grown accustomed to pain? He did not doubt that after all that training his mother put him through, he must have grown some kind of pain tolerance. What the hell DKU? Izuku flinched, hearing Bakugo shout like that. He saw Bakugo kicking the air while glaring at him as if trying to burn him alive. Why the hell can't I touch you? Bakugo yelled his question still while throwing explosions like a kid throwing temper tantrums. What? Izuku muttered, equally surprised himself. Bakugo gritted his teeth as more explosions went off in his hands. He ran at Izuku, his palm drawing close to Izuku's face. Izuku was frozen in shock. Bakugo had gone for his head. Was Bakugo trying to kill him? Time slowed down for Izuku. As Bakugo's hands drew close, for some reason, Izuku could see some form of energy around Bakugo's hand. The energy was expanding volatilely, as if waiting to explode. And then suddenly, his perception increased. Out of nowhere, he became aware of everything and anything in his surroundings. In that minuscule time, he became aware of everything within the school. He could see the bird perched on a distant tree, the swing in the opposite direction of his vision. He did not understand what was happening, but knew that, if he did not do anything, Bakugo would forever scar his face. So, he prepared to dodge, but something peculiar happened. As Bakugo got close enough to Izuku's face, he let out a small explosion powerful enough to break a child-sized rock. But to the amazement of Izuku and the absolute shock of Bakugo and his lackeys, the explosion stopped inches before Izuku's face and parted in two different ways. It was as if a barrier of some sort had been erected before Izuku's face. Bakugo's face turned into a vicious snarl. What the hell DKU? Just stand down and take the beating, you bastard. He tried sending another explosion, this time aimed at Izuku's chest, but found that he could not get near him. Even then he let the explosion go off, and once again found that the explosion could not even reach him. And without any further preamble, Bakugo threw a right hook at Izuku, his fist crackling with small explosions from his quirk. Resigning himself to his fate, Izuku quickly sidestepped the punch and snapped a firm hold onto the blonde's arm, flipping him over his hip and slamming Bakugo to the ground with a thud. Bakugo was frozen. Deku, the supposed weak, defenseless nerd, had reversed his attack. Deku could defend himself. It was a shock to his system and caused him to freeze and only stare up at the boy above him, and he did not like what he saw. Meanwhile, Izuku has felt the world slow down once again. A familiar heat he felt during his training made itself known in his chest, but it also felt like twinges of it were spreading throughout his body. That was certainly new. He'd think about that later, though. In his periphery, he saw several grotesquely long fingers lunge for him at a crawling pace. Sidestepping once more, he seized the boy's long fingers and employed one of the tactics his mother had drilled into him. Ruthlessly attack joints if your opponent was dumb enough to leave them exposed. And with a pop that made everyone in the area wince, that was exactly what he did. He still could not rest, though, as his final opponent was trying to lunge at him from his other side. The portly boy with minimally effective wings tried to use the barest of glides his quirk allowed to get the drop on Izuku. The heat in his chest left him, but the heat in the rest of his body remained. Turning around to face the winged boy head-on, he swung his arm out to clothesline the boy and kill any momentum he had. That was the intention, anyway. What happened was that the boy slammed into Izuku's arm as if it were a wall, and Izuku inadvertently launched the larger boy into the crowd with the follow-through of his swing. Yes, that was certainly a new development. While Izuku was stuck contemplating what exactly happened amidst the deathly silent and awestruck crowd, Bakugo was focused on what he had seen. He gritted his teeth. His eyes moved upwards and met Izuku's eyes. And for the third time that day, his eyes widened in shock. Because staring right back at him weren't the green eyes that he had become so accustomed to. Instead, a pair of green eyes that shone like emeralds stared back at him. These eyes were different. These eyes had a certain glow in them that did not fit well with him. These eyes seemed to pierce right through him, gazing at his soul and judging him. There was something wrong with Izuku's eyes and Bakugo did not like it. Deku's got a fucking quirk, and he's been lying about it. While Bakugo silently fumed at the perceived injustice, the teacher from earlier had finally returned to handle the ruckus. However, he was met with a silent collection of children all staring in tangible wonder and fear at Izuku. Midoriya, what have you done to these boys? The teacher immediately accused with a stern glare at the young greenhead. A part of Izuku wanted to flinch and cower at the glare he was receiving, but a larger part found the man lacking in intimidation factor compared to the frightening taskmaster that was his mother. However, the older man did not even give Izuku a chance to speak before he quickly disregarded him entirely. I don't want to hear any of your lies, he said before turning to a bystander. What did Midoriya do to those boys? Said bystander, a brunette with a heavy chameleon mutation, looked as if he was about to speak before one of his eyes fell on Izuku. The chameleon boy subconsciously flinched at the gaze, regardless of how non-threatening it was. Nothing, he quickly answered. He did nothing. The teacher raised an eyebrow, not convinced. Oh, he asked, now turning his gaze to the crowd at large. Did Midoriya truly do nothing? The choruses of yep, yeah, and I'm not a rat surprised the teacher. It was very unusual for anyone to go to bat for the little, quirkless weirdo, much less an entire crowd of bystanders who had just watched a fight. Realizing he couldn't reprimand him without any proof, he scanned the area to find even the smallest thing to pin on the boy. His eyes landed on one of the students on the ground, clutching his fingers as if they had been broken. A cruel smirk finally found its way onto his face. He walked over to the boy and kneeled beside him. Did Midoriya do this to you? He asked as gently as he could manage. The boy briefly looked up at the man through the pane before his gaze flickered to the aforementioned boy, and he immediately clammed up. I fell, he quickly stuttered out before shutting his mouth again. The man was now positively beside himself. He could not fathom what the hell the boy had done to command such fear. Was it fear coming from the other children? It certainly wasn't respect or anything positive in nature. The man made a mental note that Midoriya needed to be watched by the faculty and potentially some other parties. Before he could travel any further down that thread, the boy of the hour hesitantly stepped forward. Izuku weathered the weary and fearful looks of the other children as well as the heated glares from the teacher and Bakugo before stopping in front of the kid, whose fingers he, as his mother would say, forcefully readjusted. The crowd of onlookers had assumed that they could not have been any more surprised by the day's events, but the blatant display of a quirk from the quirkless kid after he had handily defeated the class-tough guy and his cronies was a little much for those in attendance. Many had decided to just walk away from the scene to process everything somewhere else, while many others, such as the wing boy, made mental notes not to mess with Midoriya again, lest they get their fingers broken as well. Bakugo's two cronies scampered away to lick their wounds and think about their life choices. Bakugo, on the other hand, had festered into a vicious glowering, trying to will the greenhead to melt with his glare. It wasn't yielding any success, which only served to strengthen the blonde's glare. 10. Izuku could only sigh in a mixture of frustration and resignation as he walked home from school. He was looking forward to giving his mother the news, although he was curious as to how it would affect his training. His mother had specifically not accounted for quirk usage in any of the combat and movement training they had done, so he supposed that she would figure out ways to incorporate his quirk in the routines and stances in a way similar to her fighting style. Of course, he still remembered when his mother told him her true quirk. Maybe the barrier was an application of space manipulation, probably. He was certain that the warmth he periodically felt during training had something to do with it rather than just being adrenaline, and he at least knew that he could erect barriers with whatever his quirk was. DKU. He had sensed a presence waiting around the school when he left, and the presence followed him on his path home. If it weren't for the shock of ash blonde in his periphery whenever he glanced over, he would have been worried and taken a different route. Stopping and turning to face his sort of friend who had been following him, he took stock of the livid snarl his face contorted into. This is probably about my quirk, he thought with a sigh. Hi, Casey Dash. Where the fuck do you get off looking down on me, huh? Bakugo interrupted Izuku with violently crackling palms. He grabbed the scruff of Izuku's gakurin and pulled the boy into an adjacent alleyway before roughly tossing him into it. Looking down on you. Izuku ventured in confusion as he stood and dusted himself off. He hadn't been looking down on Bakugo at all. Sure, he thought the boy was a jerk more times than should be necessary, but he didn't think any less of him, especially not in comparison to himself. Up until that afternoon, Bakugo had a quirk and Izuku didn't, and that automatically made him superior to Izuku in the eyes of society. Izuku was well aware of that. You've been hiding your shitty-ass quirk all this time to laugh at me behind my back? Haven't you, you shitty fucking Deku? Bakugo interrupted Izuku's internal musings with more screaming. Izuku was perplexed. That was more vitriol than Bakugo had ever spewed to anyone. Where did it even come from? You think you're so fucking cool that you have some shitty quirk to make that stupid barrier? You're a fucking pebble in my path to greatness, a worthless fucking scrub that needs to remember his goddamn place. You hear me, fucking Deku? Izuku had begun to suspect that the teacher had gotten to Bakugo sometime before they left. The things he was saying were absurd, and Izuku knew that nothing productive would come from the conversation should it continue. Sure, Kaken, I'll stay out of your way, Izuku dully said before brushing past Bakugo and continuing on his way home. He didn't mean to come off as dismissive, but he wanted to placate the angry blonde, and he wouldn't dare grovel or cower to his attempts at intimidation to do that. Unfortunately, Bakugo took that as another slight against him from the boy he believed was acting above his station to personally insult him, and his temper that was already hanging by a thread had been lost. He roughly grabbed Izuku and launched him deeper into the alley before igniting his palm and blowing the boy back even further. Bakugo was seeing red, and he would be sure to remind Deku of his place in a way that he'd never forget. Izuku, on the other hand, was not in the mood for this shit again, so when Bakugo charged, Izuku simply dodged and grabbed Bakugo before slamming him into the wall. His emerald eyes were somehow eerily glowing in the dark. Bakugo, for the umpteenth time that day, has frozen in shock. He could do nothing but watch in alarm as Izuku slowly raised his right hand and pointed his palm at him. The way Izuku's violently emerald eyes narrowed with contempt at him made his stomach drop, and he truly did not know if he would make it out of that alley in one piece. In an instant, a bright blue flash erupted from Izuku's palm, and Bakugo clamped his eyes shut in a vice grip, awaiting the inevitable punches to wash over him. But they never did. He waited at least 5 seconds for something to happen, only opening his eyes to assess the situation when it was clear that nothing would be happening. Izuku was gone, the only evidence that he was even there being the concrete where he once stood caved in. Bakugo took a moment to catch his breath before quickly leaving the alley and making a beeline for his home, pushing past the nosy extras who came to investigate the explosions. 10. Meanwhile, Izuku was happy about the new development. His mom was right all along about his quirk, and now, a whole new dimension had been added to both his arsenal and the kind of training they could do together. Finally arriving at his complex, he bounded up the stairs and giddily reached for his front door, practically throwing himself inside in his excitement. Mom, you were right. I have a quirk. Chapter 3, Spotlight to UA. Mom, you were right. I have a quirk. Izuku threw himself inside the house with no restraints and lots of excitement, but to his surprise, the house was eerily quiet. Mom, where are you? But he received no response. He then looked around and saw a paper on the table along with a pizza box. Picking the paper up, it read, Izuku, I'm sorry I'm not at home right now. I got an emergency call from an old friend, and hopefully I'll be home soon, and the pizza box will be in case I don't come back home in time to make dinner. P.S. Mom. Izuku exhaled, feeling very exhausted as he relived the day's events. Plopping on the chair, he dropped the paper on the table and turned on the TV. Well, the news could wait till later. 10. Inko sighed as she blew her hot coffee. The person sitting across her had not said a word, and she was getting annoyed. Well, long time no see, Kana. Why haven't you been calling me? Well, Hero B business and all that. The purple-haired woman sitting across her answered. She was relatively pretty with her purple hair, eyebrows, and the casual hoodie, jeans, and glasses she was wearing. I always took the time out to train you. I never gave excuses even while I was a hero. Seriously, how hard is it going to be to pick up the phone and dial my number? I'm sorry, Kana said with an apprehensive and downcast look on her face. Inko leaned closer to Kana's face before saying, Why are you scared? Did I touch you? Did I do anything to you? Inko asked with a confused expression on her face, and the sunglasses she wore weren't even hiding her raised eyebrows. Why, you did a lot of things to me, Kana thought with a pensive look on her face before replying. And no, you didn't do anything to me. Stop stuttering. It's annoying. Okay. So what you call me for? And it better be something worth my time, but I can't even be that mad because I came here for good coffee, and I got it, Inko said while sipping her coffee. Well, they offered me a job at UA, and I recommended you. Damn it, get your thoughts back in order, Kana. Inko asked with raised eyebrows while looking at Kana with a smile on her face. They recommended me for a job dash. I heard you the first time, that's why I said, didn't you tell them about my retirement? Inko asked with a confused expression. Why, yes I did, but you're a better teacher than me. Sorry, but Limitless is retired now, and she isn't coming back. Well, look at it this way, if you come out of retirement, well, you don't even have to come out of retirement fully, you just have to come and teach some kids at UA. I'll think about it, was Inko's simple reply. Inko then stood up like she was about to go, but a voice called out to her and stopped her in her tracks. She turned back with an annoyed face to reply. What is it, Kana? Kana fumbled with her purse before pulling out a newspaper and tossing it to Inko, who caught it and began to read. She pulled up her glasses, and in less than a minute she was done with reading it. It was an article about how the commission was ignorant of reforming long-thought dead ideals. Anything of note? Potentially too many things of note. Inko frowned. A terrorist call doesn't sound like something you'd contact me for. It's about the Meta Liberation Army. They've been bolstering their ranks lately and have risen through the government to be branded with an S-rank status, but the commission is not doing a thing because they believe that MLA sympathizers are very large in numbers, and taking it down will cause societal problems. From schools to public gatherings, the MLA's grip on Japan's populace grows day by day. I thought the Meta Liberation Army was disbanded after the Meta Liberation War? Inko asked. It did, and the bulk of their army, which was rounded up, was either imprisoned or killed, officially, anyway. But many of the sentiments surrounding quirk liberation in his biography remained in a portion of society. That portion has only grown and festered over the years. While not outright supporters of Destro, there are several factions that align themselves with the basic premise of the original Meta Liberation Army. For the moment, there's small pockets of pro-quirk activists, small-time villains, and terrorists leading indoctrination campaigns to bolster their numbers. As I said, I'll look into it, Inko said, standing up to leave. Please do, and we think your district is one of the indoctrination zones, Kana said bluntly, drawing Inko's attention once more. She had pulled out her last trump card and hopefully it would work. Why isn't the JSDF attacking them right now if the Meta Liberation Army still exists? Well, we don't even know if the Meta Liberation Army still exists. For all we know, it could be a group of small-time criminals or small-time crime groups that align themselves with the original premise of Destro and the Big Five. And the Meta Liberation Army, even if they exist, they have kept their existence pretty hidden, so we do not have definitive proof of their existence, or even definitive proof against them. And even if the Meta Liberation Army still exists, attacking them will not only cause political problems, but societal issues, so right now, even if they exist, we are stuck at tentative stalemate. Pulling out her last card, Kana used an old code developed by superheroes to communicate with each other. Supervillain attack. All Might is out of commission. Duration indeterminable. Inko's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, and she nodded in understanding. Things truly just could not have been simple. Exhaling, she pressed on. Anything else? No, not really. By the way, what course would I be teaching? Inquired Inko. Well, you'd be teaching practical heroics, Kana said with a longing expression on her face. I thought they employed All Might for that. So you do keep tabs on heroics after all, Kana said with a shit-eating grin on her face. Don't push it. Sorry, but All Might is a terrible teacher. The few times I've been there, he acts like a stuttering loser, haha. Oh God, you should have seen it. So, All Might is bad at something too, huh? Upon seeing Kana's confused face, she quickly corrected herself. Not that I expected him to be good at everything. As I said before, I'll look into it. See ya, Inko said, standing up and leaving her half-finished coffee. As Inko left, Kana let a deep sigh out before grumbling. I swear, I don't get paid enough for this shit. 10. Upon getting home, Inko little Izuku watching TV and his eyes brightened when he saw her not even giving her a chance. He threw himself at her screaming, I got a quirk today. So Izuku, how are you feeling now? She asked with a hint of fear. Exhausted, was Izuku's simple reply. How did you unlock it anyway? Please, tell me all about it, she said with a way too cheerful tone. Well, I was in school today, and he didn't want to tell her about KAISEN, but his mother continued to look at him with curiosity. Don't bother to lie to me, Izuku. I know that the six eyes only manifest themselves when stress, trauma, or high levels of adrenaline are involved. So, what the heck could have happened to trigger it? Aizawa was in school, and KAISEN. Izuku didn't want to lie to her because it was obvious she wasn't buying it, and he was a terrible liar. I will tell you about it later, Mom. He looked up at his mother, who had her eyes closed, as well as a mocking smirk on her face. Upon seeing it, Izuku knew KAISEN was done for. He could only hope his mother was in a good mood. She then opened one of her eyes and looked at him curiously, waiting for an explanation, but when none came, she drew her conclusion. He was threatening you, she said, a tad bit too calm. He knew she was ruthless, especially during training, and he knew of her past as an underground pro hero, but that newest bit of information only confirmed one thing to him. His mother was fucking terrifying. Izuku, knowing what his mother could do and sensing potential danger, told her about everything that happened that day. He told her about the initial scuffle with Bakugo. He told her about his teacher's blatant bigotry. He told her about Bakugo hunting him down and his suspicions that the teacher orchestrated it. And he told her about his quirk's activation. The blankness of her face after he finished deeply unsettled him. He could see a ravenous fury in her gaze that contrasted with the careful nothingness, and it had him sweating bullets. It may not have been a very heroic thought, but he was just glad to not be the target of her wrath and prayed for a quick demise for anyone who was. On the outside, Izuku paled as he imagined his mother going to the Bakugo's house and tearing them apart with an unsettling grin. Izuku knew his mother had different kinds of smiles for different emotions. A smile with her mouth curved upwards showed she was listening or happy. A smile with her mouth curved sideways or downwards indicated she was unhappy or annoyed, but a smile with her eyes narrowed and her smile, turning into a crazed smirk, indicated that she was fighting or being scary. He even had a secret chart for her smiles, but he would take that to the grave with him. The last thing he needed was people calling him a weirdo or creep. On the other hand, Inko went into deep thought before deciding to call her longtime friend Mitsuki. Oh, hello Inky, long time. So why did you decide to call today? You usually don't call during business hours. Must be important, or maybe you are just missing your old friend. Am I right, Inko? Please don't call me that name, and we spoke last week, Inko replied in a deadpan tone. That's a bit too long, don't you think? Inko couldn't help but sigh. Her sighs were becoming too much. Mitsuki, did Katsuki tell you about what happened? There was a pause on the line, and Inko could tell that Mitsuki was hesitant to respond. Have you noticed any changes in Katsuki? Changes like what? I don't know, any changes at all. Katsuki's been talking about a new quiet but kick-ass girl in his class. Honestly, I think he may even have a... Not that kind of change, damn it. Then, what kind of changes are you talking about? You know what? Let me just drop the ball. Inko was about to tell Mitsuki about the MLA, but Mitsuki decided to reply to her in a serious tone. The little brat has been quiet these last few days. He's been more irritable than normal, too, and he spent all of his time in his room and wouldn't come out, not even to eat. I don't know what happened yesterday because he wouldn't tell me. I think I know what's causing that. He and Izuku got into a bit of a scuffle, and Izuku manifested his quirk. A powerful one, too. Wait, that's it. The little shit isn't top dog anymore, and he's nursing his pride? Huh, serves him right. Hope this humbles him a little. Inko sighed into the phone. Yeah, it's like my quirk, but I wish that were the end of it. Did something happen to little Izu? Inko's voice became as hard as steel. No, the school, though, is a different story. There was another silence on the line. You're bringing out the hero's voice. Oh, damn, this must be serious. Izuku told me that Katsuki tried to viciously assault him in an alleyway after detention. After hearing Mitsuki gasp, she quickly continued. He thinks that one of the teachers specifically influenced Katsuki to do it, and I have reason to believe him. Oh my god, Inko, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that it was this bad. Inko filed that strange comment away for later. Wait, well, don't worry, it's fine, Mitsuki. I mean, it isn't, and I wish it hadn't happened, but I don't blame Katsuki, at least not entirely. It's the main reason I'm calling. The school district is poisoned. What do you mean? Well, I mean that lately, I don't know how many adults have brought Katsuki home or come here to report illegal quirk usage. I think some fishy shit is going on here. It's a rather long story, but let's just say that a collection of old-school quirk supremacists are trying to amass a considerable following in the country, and they've got hands in a bunch of places, school districts included, to start converting impressionable people. Our school district is one of them. Holy shit, do I even want to know how you got that information? Oh shit, is Limitless coming out of retirement? Mitsuki, don't push it. I know, I'm sorry, but this sounds like really serious business. If there was ever a time for the Limitless herself to return. Inko sighed once more. Mitsuki, we're getting off track here. Right? Should I move Katsuki to a new district? That would be best for now. We still need to figure out just how far this influence has spread, though. I doubt this district is the only one in the city in need of a purge, so keep an eye out for anything fishy, and I'll keep an ear to the ground for any further developments. I'll follow your lead, Pro. Inko's long-suffering sigh only vindicated Mitsuki's smirk. I'll just tell him the school's under probation by the government or the principal is a pedo if he asks questions. What are you planning to do for Izuku? Can't say. Better that I don't say. Hero business, and all that. So you're getting back into the game, huh? As I said, don't push it. Anyway, reluctantly, and only in an educator's capacity, but maybe yes. At Mitsuki's inquisitive hum, she explained, I was offered a job by the principal of UA. Given current events and potential future events, it was for the best that I took it. Oh, before I forget, did you tell Mayaka since? You know, considering elite schools would be a target of MLA propaganda. I'll tell her later. I haven't told her as of yet. Okay. Anyway, when are you coming to see her? Well, I've been busy, but I should come next week. By the way, how is she? She's doing fine, and she asked me to thank you for paying for her therapy sessions. It's no problem at all. A few thousand yen wouldn't kill anyone. Soon, a much longer silence fell over them, and sometime later the call was ended. Meanwhile, Izuku was nervous about what his mother would do to anyone who had even accidentally wronged him in his life. Mom? Why you're not going to tear Bakugo apart with your purple blast and then reassemble him into a pig or something, right? He truly hoped he did not doom his sort of friend. Was that still even applicable? To such a horrible fate. What do you take me for? The question came as it surprised to Izuku, and it was quiet. Way too quiet in Izuku's opinion to make it worse. The winds blew, adding more tension to the quietness, and Izuku was 1000% sure he had pissed himself. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just surprised you're not angry. Izuku couldn't help but squawk out timidly. Oh no, I am angry, but I am sure Katsuki won't be bothering you for a while. He learned his lesson after all, and I can't put someone together back after taking them apart. What I'm bothered about is the teacher who decided it wasn't a good idea to put my child in harm's way. Her face then shifted into it, her training grin, and in that moment Izuku knew that his teacher was done for, and Izuku started crying as he imagined his teacher's burial ceremony. Anyway, I got a job offer at UA as a practical heroics teacher. UA, the UA. Mom, I'm so happy for you. I haven't accepted it. But why? Asterisk sniff, asterisk sniff. Izuku was looking at his mother with a pleading expression written all over his face. Inko did not look at Izuku. She would not fall for it. Goddamn, she would not. Oh fuck, she did. Fine, I'll take the job. Just let me call the principal. There are a few things I would like to discuss with him. Yes, Izuku shouted before jumping up only to see himself levitating midair. He simply chalked it up to his quirk and floated down with the aid of his mother, and given her lack of reaction, it was his quirk at work. Cool, I can float now? Hey mom, didn't you say your mother could float too? Izuku asked while checking himself out. Yes, Aizu, and she and I also had the same quirk, I think. But anyway, I'll explain it to you later. His mother answered while smiling. Inko, in deep thought, decided to call her longtime friend and associate the one and furry Nizu. Nizu was a non-combatant pro who had saved her life directly or indirectly on many occasions. He was one of the people Inko could explicitly trust from her time as a pro. Picking up the phone again, she dialed the little trickster's number. Hello, Nizu, long time. Inko said, simply keeping pleasantries to a minimum. How long has it been? 7 or 8 years? 7 years, 6 months, and 3 weeks. A voice replied to her over the phone. Hello, Mrs. Midoriya, how nice is it to talk to you again? Or shall you return to being Ms. Mikomo since your husband died a few years ago? A voice chirped ecstatically over the phone. How did you know? It happened a few years ago, and I don't remember telling you anything about it. In fact, you know what? Forget about it. You are Nizu. That I am. Cut the shit, Nizu. I know you're behind this. Oh my, what would make you think that, Ms. Mikomo? Just call me Inko. Was everything she said true? Yes, unfortunately. I am creating a war council and gathering allies. We can't tell if our comrades are sympathizers to their cause, but better safe than sorry. I have allies infiltrating Daika City as we speak. Daika, Inko tried to jog her memory. That's the weird city that people who live there sprout quirkist ideals, right? The tens of thousands of people there who tend not to move out to anywhere else. Inko paled. Potentially tens of thousands of isolated people living within an MLA indoctrination camp, Nizu answered with a sad tone. And what about All Might being out of commission? That is not something we can discuss over the phone, Nizu answered solemnly, but his tone left no room for questions. Changing topics, what would I be teaching and why didn't I know you were now the principal of UA? It was a development that occurred during your absence from heroics, Nizu began. It's my way of shaping future generations of heroes away from the Commission's influence, and, hopefully, to create fewer situations where fantastic heroes like yourself become too disillusioned with the ugly truth. And I'm planning on you teaching 2nd and 3rd year's practical hero course. Despite All Might being a terrible teacher, the 1st year's curriculum is easy enough for even All Might to teach, but the 2nd and 3rd years are more complex. Too complex for All Might to teach. What makes you think I'm a good teacher? You train Kana, and she's a top 10 hero. She told you, right? That little dipshit. I'll strangle her next time I see her. Please don't. Anyway, for kids now to become heroes. Inko's glare softened, and she took a minute to gather the right words to respond to Nizu. To do that, you'd have to clean up the ugly truth that's hidden away. Oh, don't fret. Taking down the Hero Commission is next on my list after the MLA, Nizu happily responded. Inko couldn't help the chuckle that escaped her. Never change, rat. I also presume you will be pulling Izuku from his current school, given the knowledge that it is likely an MLA indoctrination center, he continued. Might I suggest in schools free of MLA influence? Sure, but I have one condition. Well, name it. I'll deal with Izuku personally, and my son can come to train at UA, she said, showing her training grin. Izuku, who was sitting listening to the conversation while eating pizza, stopped and looked at Inko. What he saw made a shiver go down his spine. He wondered at that moment if he made a mistake by pressuring his mother to accept the job offer. Well then, Limitless, I'd like to humbly welcome you to our UA staff, Nizu said over the phone. Inko flinched at the use of her hero name. I suppose I have to get used to hearing that name again. The soft sound of snickering made her turn to her son with an annoyed glare. What? Limitless? Really? Izuku managed through giggles. It was original at the time, Inko defended, and you have no room to poke fun, Mr. Small Might. Mom, you promised not to talk about it anymore. Chapter 4, Reality Check. 2 years after Izuku's training began, Inko had bought herself a restaurant, and although small at first, it grew in a few years to become one of the biggest Japanese-centric restaurants in the world. Overnight, Inko became the thing she hated most, a celebrity. While she hated her newfound celebrity status, that didn't mean she hated her wealth. She bought an old, abandoned Japanese-themed house a few blocks from where she formerly lived and renovated it. It was a duplex with tatama floors, matte flooring, sliding doors, and wooden Engawa verandas. She had also begun to participate more in heroics again, advising the current owner of her former hero agency and her former mentoree, Kana Kisumi, aka Lady Nagat. Overall, things were good for years. Regarding the MLA, many schools, including Izuku's school, had been shut down by the Hero Commission due to quirk discrimination and the promotion of terrorist ideals. Finding evidence against such schools wasn't hard. Statements from suspicious parents like Mistuki and children, as well as the presence of MLA materials. The last school shut down was an American-owned private school for the elite, as well the last of the 12th district, by their count, across Japan that had been seized, and they were beginning to realize just how bad the issue had truly been. Once one went down, several more accidentally revealed themselves by going on high alert. Occasionally, some teachers who either weren't buying into the scheme or had suspicions of a conspiracy going on within the school sent in anonymous reports about their schools. Inko herself had infiltrated a few schools with the help of Nizu. The former led to a lot more indoctrination plots being revealed. The worst was that most schools that were interrogated revealed their connection to quirk supremacist groups not directly tied to the MLA, which still meant that the situation had not changed and the tentative stalemate was still in place, much to the dismay of Nizu and Inko. Inko had taken Izuku to an academy called Sumai, which was a prestigious school for the elite under strict supervision from the government and heroes due to the high amount of aspiring pro-heroes, rich kids, as well as relatives of prominent pro-heroes attending there. 10. Grrrr. Slamming his arms into the pesky alarm clock, Izuku removed the blanket from his face and crawled out of the bed with an annoyed expression written all over his face. This was Izuku Midoriya, now 15 years old, who had grown quite a lot in the last decade. He now had muscles, six-packs, and had grown much taller, standing at 5'9" inches tall, and thanks to his mother, he now had an above-athletic figure. It was another Saturday, which meant no school, no homework, and no training session with the bane of his existence, his mother. Meandering to the bathroom, he did the usual. He brushed his teeth, took a shower, and went to the dining room to have breakfast when he saw his mother preparing breakfast while humming an unfamiliar tune. "Good morning, Mom," Izuku greeted cheerfully as always. "Good morning, Aiza-chan," his mother greeted back, giving him a bright smile. "Izuku, your UA entrance is coming up in a few months, and I hope you're ready," his mother said while still cooking breakfast. Yeah, I'm ready for anything, although I still don't understand why you won't recommend me or tell me what the standard entrance is about." "Oh, come on. What would be the fun in that? And if you want a clue, you have to be smart as well as strong to pass." Izuku didn't reply, but he gave his mother an annoyed glance. "If you want to prepare, clean up Dagoba Beach with your quirk." "Dagoba Beach? I don't know the place you're talking about." "Just ask for directions. And I want the beach cleaned before the UA entrance exam." "Is that a challenge?" Izuku asked, smirking. "Sure, take it as you will." 10. Izuku walked to the train station and decided to take the shortcut he was familiar with in Muzutafu, as it was his home after all. He walked, getting under a tunnel while browsing for the latest hero news on the phone. He walked into the tunnel with his sunglasses on. It was too dark for a normal person to see through, but to him, it helped filter unwanted details out of his vision. It was all due to his quirk, and while the six eyes were a blessing, they were also a curse. They could see things at an enhanced rate as well as an excess detail. He could also switch between different visions depending on the situation, and his eyes also helped his hero analysis. Izuku had a very keen interest in studying heroes and villains alike and deciphering their quirks, finding ways to counter them, and ways to even improve them. His six eyes helped him with that a lot. The very first thing that his mother told him about his quirk was it was called Limitless. It had three components, which application was the manipulation of space, and the six eyes was a biological mutation that could not only see when quirks are being activated, but could also understand someone's quirk to some extent just by looking at them. If he looked at someone like Bakugo, he would see the energy in his palms as well as the energy emanating from his quirk factor. But too bad he couldn't turn off the damn thing. But this power also came with downsides. One was that it took direct eye contact with the person's body. However, His mother told him that if he kept training the six eyes, he could one day instantly identify the quirk and get the deepest understanding of how that quirk works. The other downside was that in a world filled with quirks, if he kept his eyes uncovered, his eyes would constantly analyze quirks on their own, putting a great amount of strain on his brain, and he would be seeing things in more detail than necessary, and it was very annoying. It was like his eyes were feeding his brain too much information, and he would constantly get migraines and headaches when he first discovered that his eyes could do that. That was when he was just 5 years old and shortly after he awakened his quirk. His mother found a way around that weakness by making him wear the darkest glass available. While a normal person would not be able to see anything, thanks to his quirk, he could see even through the darkest glass in the world. That day, Izuku learned the hard way why his mother covered her eyes most of the time. And even with his eyes covered, he could still see the world in some kind of infrared vision. Izuku was so absorbed in his mental ramblings that he failed to notice the moving piece of sludge that crawled out of the sewers. Ah, a medium-sized cloak now. Thanks to you I can finally escape, All Might. The sludge said, all the while moving towards Izuku. Izuku in question just raised his eyebrows and watched as the sludge crawled towards him. All Might is in JUJUTSU, was the only question running through his mind as the living pile of sludge crawled towards him. Sighing, he activated Infinity, and the sludge proceeded to slam into an invisible wall. Shit, is this your quirk? The sludge villain retreated while asking, slightly dazed from the ordeal. Yeah, and now that you know you can't touch me, and All Might is after you, what are you going to do? Izuku asked with a smirk in his face. Shit. The villain said, realizing the situation it had gotten into, decided to do the next best thing, which was to flee the scene, but All Might came bursting out of the sewers with a mighty leap and a hearty laugh. I am here, All Might said while coming out of the sewers, showing his giant smile and ripped muscles. You have been terrorizing this city long enough, villain. Oh shit, it's All Might, Izuku said while trying and failing to keep his fanboy nature in check. All Might punched the air in front of him, and while it may have seemed like a random action, the pressure of his punch was more than enough to blow the sludge villain and Izuku away. Izuku hit the ground with a thud, and he then proceeded to get up while still looking at All Might with awe. Sorry, young man. I may have overdid that punch, but I have been pursuing that villain for hours, haha. It's okay, All Might, I understand, and we should probably capture that sludge, he said while pointing to the liquid which was scattered everywhere. Thank you for your help, young citizen, but I can take it from here. It's okay, All Might, and trust me, this will only take a second, he said with a confident smile, and then proceeded to raise his hands, and a blue sphere began to form in his hands, which attracted the sludge to form a perfect sphere in his hands. All Might just handed him a bottle wordlessly, which he then put the sludge in. Handing the bottle back to All Might, he began to search himself, only to let out a groan when he found out that his notebook wasn't with him. Please do tell, young man, what is your quirk? It's space manipulation, Izuku answered simply. Haha, that is a very useful quirk, young man, especially in heroics. Well, thank you for your continued support, citizen, All Might said while flexing his legs. Izuku blushed a little at the comment, and he saw All Might stretching his legs, probably about to go. Izuku raised his sunglasses to take a look at this man's quirk, and what he saw shocked him. All Might's body had energy wafting out of it, and Izuku deciphered that his quirk had to deal with stockpiling of energy, which he released for short bursts of strength. Izuku saw the wound at his side, and before he could even ask what it was, All Might leaped away, leaving a dust trail in his wake. 10. As Izuku walked to Dagoba Beach, there was one thing on his mind. No, two things. 1. Failure to get All Might's autograph. 2. Coming up with theories on All Might's quirk. He knew that All Might's quirk was an emitter that stockpiled energy for short bursts of strength, but even though the six eyes had shown him what All Might's quirk was, there was a theory in his mind that suggested otherwise. If All Might's quirk was indeed an emitter quirk that stockpiled energy, then with his feats the amount of energy required would be too much for his body to handle. He would be breaking his limbs every time he tried to use the quirk, and the energy required in the first place would be enormous. More enormous than any stockpiling or strength could dish out. Izuku continued to mull over All Might's quirk and his injury. He saw the injury, and it was nasty. He wondered what kind of villain could do that to him. Maybe he overlooked it as it was only a quick peek, and it was only a minor injury. Injuries were common in their line of work after all. Izuku continued to think about it as he got to the train station and boarded the train. Setting the maps on his phone for Dagoba Beach, he finally allowed himself to sleep. Upon getting to the beach, Izuku was surprised by the amount of trash he saw. Broken appliances, cars, and heaps of metal and trash, plus the whole place reeked. It was like the whole city just came together to dump their whole trash there. Initially stunned, Izuku removed his sunglasses and cracked his knuckles before smirking. Operation Clean Dagoba Beach has begun. Stretching out his hands, a faint blue energy began to gather and swirl, and Izuku pointed his arms in the direction of trash to his left before chanting. Technique reversal, red. Izuku made the motion again and again, but nothing happened. Mulling over his inability to master or use red, he instead decided to use its opposite. Technique amplification maximum output, blue. In an instant, the trash began to get absorbed and compressed into a small blue sphere in his palms, and when Izuku felt satisfied, he stopped the energy and looked around. 1/3 of the trash on the beach had been obliterated and compressed into a small blue sphere the size of a basketball. Izuku looked at the sphere in his hands and groaned. If only he could use reverse techniques. No matter how hard he tried, he could never use it. He remembered what happened when his mom first tried to explain it to him. 10. Flashback. 6 years ago. Izuku tumbled across the floor only for him to get back up. Crouching, he charged low, and upon getting close he decided to go for an uppercut, but she dodged before kicking him in the gut, sending him sprawling across the ground again. Izuku could honestly claim that he had kissed the ground more times than the numbers he could count. Inko was wearing a black tank top and black combat trousers, and she had stopped wearing contact lenses over her eyes and instead wore black sunglasses to cover her eyes. How can you become a pro hero if you can't even survive a simple spar with your dear old mother? Come on, get up, Aizawa, we ain't done here. Oi, oi, Izuku got up and stared at her, and she just stood there nonchalantly slumping her shoulders and stuffing her hands in her pocket. How the heck can you use red and black flash, but I can't? What am I doing wrong? Izuku nearly yelled, but managed to keep his composure even with his legs shaking and tears pricking his eyes. His mother only looked at him in confusion for what seemed like an eternity before she started laughing. Izuku, to use techniques like that, you need to be able to use the reverse of the energy you use now. How do I do that? Izuku asked with hope but confusion in his blindfolded eyes. Well, reverse techniques are very hard to master, so don't sell yourself short for not being able to master it. I didn't fully master it till I was 18 in my UA third year. Reverse techniques work by converting negative energy into positive energy by taking two sources of cursed energy and multiplying them by one other. As a result, the energy that destroys becomes energy that is created, and negative energy becomes positive. Despite sounding simple enough, producing reverse cursed energy is extremely complex and difficult to perform for most users of Limitless, and I wouldn't think any less of you if you didn't or cannot master the technique. She then stopped mumbling to herself to see if Izuku was still paying attention, and what she saw made her want to laugh hard. Izuku was sitting on the ground looking up at her with a confused expression on his face. His face was red and his head was smoking from stressing his brain. You know what? I give up on learning the reverse technique. How in the world did the human body turn to an arithmetical equation? Like I said, Izuku reverse techniques are complex. Very complex. Flashback end. 10. Izuku smiled, satisfied with the result, and prepared to do the same move again when he felt a presence trying to sneak up on him. Dissipating the energy, there was nothing in Izuku's palms except a small piece of metal which he put in his pockets. He then caught the arms trying to touch him and without turning around said, "I can see you, Momo. I thought for a moment there I had you. But there is always a next time." Izuku then turned his back to see the new arrival. She was a relatively tall and beautiful girl with a mature physique and long black hair tied into a spiky ponytail with a large strand hanging on the right side of her face. Her eyes are big and also sharp, dark in color, and paired with short eyebrows set in a determined expression. Good luck with that, Izuku said, letting go of her hands with a smile on his face. Do you have eyes at the back of your head? No offense, though, Momo said with a curious expression. Well, I guess we'll never know, Izuku said while stretching his limbs sideways. That doesn't answer the question, Izuku, Momo said with a frown. Deciding not to push the subject as she wasn't going to get an answer out of him, she reluctantly dropped the subject. For now. So how did you convince your mother to let you come here? Izuku said, distracting her from her thoughts. Well, Elle just told her about your message and offer, and while she was initially reluctant at first when I mentioned Dagoba Beach, she just let me go. Izuku, who knew Aunt Mayaka better, just raised an eyebrow that she would just let her go like that. Momo's mother initially didn't even want her daughter to be a hero, and she would willingly just let her daughter train on some rundown beach when she could afford high-class quirk gyms. Something seemed wrong. Maybe his mom had something to do with this. It seemed like she was familiar with the place. Momo continued, unaware of Izuku's mental tangents. And that I'd be doing good work for the community by cleaning up this dirty place. That's nice, Izuku said, simply having not listened to about half the conversation. Anyway, let's get to training and cleaning, Izuku said, smirking and raising a fist in the air. Momo could only smile awkwardly and timidly raise a fist in the air too. Oh, it was going to be a long day. 10. Across the city, a skeletal blonde man with a very skinny frame, sunken blue eyes, and clothes hanging limply from his body walked and clutched his right side, and from the look of his face, he was in pain. God damn it. His old wound started flaring again, reminding him of the everlasting pain he had to bear for being the symbol of peace. Walking quietly, the man brought out a handkerchief which had turned red from what was presumably blood stains and coughed in it, leaving yet another fresh blood stain on it. The sludge villain had made him pursue him for hours, and by the time he caught him, his time had almost run out. He walked quietly, ignoring glances from passers-by, lost in his thoughts until a noise brought him out of it. Seeing three teenagers, probably no older than 16, pointing a knife at the symbol of peace while smirking made the man sigh. Look, old man, give us the money and there ain't gonna be any bloodshedding tonight, a teenage boy with blonde hair said, smirking while pointing the knife at him. Yeah, old man, we would honestly hate to hurt ya, the second teenager with a snake mutation said. The third one simply made knife-slicing motions. The man sighed. They just had to attack now. At any other time of the day, these guys would have earned themselves a one-way ticket to Ketsubutsu Villain Rehabilitation Academy. But now he was weak, and he honestly hated that his weakness had to be rubbed in his face like this. Sighing again, he put his hands into his pockets, brought out his wallet, and gave them the money he had. Is this all, old man? The blonde teenager asked after counting the money. Yes, that's all, the man answered, but as they were about to walk away, an orange-haired girl came and delivered a flying brutal kick to the teenage boy with a snake mutation. Before the other boys could properly retaliate, an uppercut and a knee to the groin knocked them out quickly. The man was beyond shocked that this girl had swiftly but brutally knocked out three thugs, petty thugs, but thugs nonetheless. Excuse me, sir, are you okay? I've called the police for these boys because I saw them harassing you earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't come earlier. My legs just kind of moved on their own when I saw the right chance to attack. The girl rambled on while rubbing the back of her head sheepishly. You have my deepest gratitude, young lady, but if I may, why did you help me? The man asked with a serious face. Would you believe me if I told you my legs moved on their own? The girl asked awkwardly. What is your name, young lady? The man asked. It's Suka Kendo, sir, the orange-haired girl replied. My name is Yagi Tashinori, and as I said, you have my deepest gratitude. It's something any decent person in my stead would have done. And besides, how can I become a hero if I ignore people in need of help? At this revelation, Tashinori coughed out a glob of blood. In a panic, Kendo started asking continuously, I'm so sorry, sir, are you okay? I'm fine. It's a regular occurrence, Tashinori said, dismissing her concerns with a simple hand wave. This seemed to calm down Kendo, although she was still visibly rattled. Young woman, you want to be a hero? Yes, It's been my dream ever since I was a little child. I have trained through hell to achieve this. Kendo answered while having a nostalgic smile on her face. What is your quirk, if I may ask? Toshinori asked while still keeping his straight face. It's called Big Fists. I can enlarge my hands several times its normal size, and while it's an average quirk, when combined with martial arts it can be deadly. Kendo answered while now sporting a serious face. I can see your expertise in martial arts, and I know you will make a great hero. Before she could react and answer his statement, a police car came to pick up the unruly teenagers, and Kendo wanted to speak to them. Toshinori interrupted her, telling her to go home, and reluctantly, she agreed. As she walked away, there was only one thing on Toshinori's mind. I wonder if she's the one. Chapter V. First Spotlight. Everything felt so surreal. That was the feeling Izuku felt even though he had come to UA a few times over the years. Izuku could not drown out the feeling of nervousness, excitement, and apprehension as he walked through the gates to UA for what felt like the first time. He passed by a few applicants who had the same look as him, but he ignored them. Too bad Momo couldn't join him as her mother had insisted that she take the recommendation exam. At the thought of recommendations, Izuku frowned and his face became slightly annoyed because while the entrance exam was the general way to get into UA, the recommendations were far easier, and it was the most prestigious way of getting into UA, but his mother refused to recommend him, instead recommending Momo for UA. Well, no use thinking about that now as nothing could dampen his mood. And just as he said that, he saw a spiky ash blonde hair and the perpetual face scowl belonging to the king of assholes that was recognizable anywhere to him. Katsuki Bakugo was a guy Izuku hadn't seen in many years, and he was so shocked that his gaze lingered on Katsuki longer than it was supposed to with his mouth agape. But fortunately, Katsuki did not notice or recognize him, and he was so shocked he didn't know when he bumped into somebody who let out a cute yelp in response. She tripped, but she touched herself, stopping herself from falling when she began to float. Ah, sorry there, Izuku said, looking down at the floating girl. Oh, it's okay, the girl said while doing something with her hands that allowed her to float down to the ground. She stood up, dusting herself, and Izuku could now properly see her auburn hair, short round stature, and the perpetual rosy blush on her puffy cheeks. Honestly, in Izuku's opinion, she was kind of cute. I'm sorry, I would have caught you, but I didn't know you already had it covered, Izuku could only say with a sheepish smile. It's fine, the girl replied simply. So, I take it you are here for the entrance exams? The cute girl asked in an inquiring tone. I'm taking the exam, but are you taking the entrance exam too? Yes, and my name is Achiko Uraraka, by the way. Not wanting to risk her recognizing him due to his mother, he quickly but subtly changed the subject. Your quirk, how does it work? If the girl noticed the sudden change in subject, she didn't comment on it. It's called zero gravity. I can remove the gravity of anything I touch and then restore it by pressing my fingers together. What a fascinating quirk, Izuku thought absent-mindedly, while walking away quickly before she asked him about his name. The last he needed was for her to ask him questions about his mother. Wait, Achiko said while walking just as quickly towards him. What's your quirk? Space manipulation, Izuku replied with practiced ease while slowing down his pace. Wow, that's cool, Achiko said while now walking beside him. What's your name, by the way? And this was what Izuku hated, and while he could tell her a fake name, if she passed the exam he'd have kind of a hard time explaining himself. Ah, screw it. Izuku Midoriya, Izuku replied, now quickening the pace, leaving Achiko behind. Meanwhile, Achiko just stood there not expecting this. She had left her mostly bare apartment simultaneously excited and simultaneously nervous about the exam meant to determine her future when this frankly handsome, bespectacled, green-haired boy bumped into her, nearly making her eat shit on her dream day. He came off as a bit rude, no awkward, but pleasant to talk to, but what she had not expected was for the said boy to be related to the owner of one of, if not the most popular Japanese restaurants in Asia. A dread in her stomach began to make itself known as she began to replay her conversation, thinking she had offended him. 10. Izuku was very unhappy with himself as he weaved through the halls of UA with ease. While many aspiring students were stuck trying to get to the testing areas, Izuku had come here enough times to know his way around subconsciously. His mind constantly replayed the conversation with Achiko, and Izuku began to think he had come off as an asshole more times than necessary in their conversation. He made a mental note to apologize to her later. Izuku reached the testing area, which was just a classroom. Izuku entered the classroom and saw other examinees sitting there. Finding his seat, he saw a very tired-looking power loader with a stack of papers. 45 minutes later, when all the examinees had arrived, power loader began to distribute the papers, and after sharing the papers, he cleared his throat and spoke up. Before you all start, I want to mention a few things. Firstly, the exam time in total for each paper is 2 hours, and you'd be doing 3 subjects maths, the pro said as he ignored students groaning at the mention of math, science, and written heroics. And each subject would be about 100 questions in total. After 2 hours, you'd be given extra minutes to tidy up your work and submit. And secondly, the pro paused and sent a scathing glare the way of the students. Don't cheat. Don't do anything stupid that would implicate you. I'll be watching y'all, and if you cheat, you'd be disqualified, as well as banned from taking the exam for 3 years. And lastly, don't forget to go plus ultra. No one said anything as they let power loader's words sink in. Good, you all can start now. 10. Izuku ignored the stares and looks of astonishment sent his way by other examinees as he had finished the 3 subjects in an hour, which was a feat itself. Raising his hands, he told Power Loader he had finished, and all Power Laser did was instruct him to drop it under his locker. You can hang out in the cafeteria until it's time for the practical exam. Power Loader called out to him. Thank you, sir, was Izuku's curt reply. Izuku closed the door behind him and started stretching his limbs while walking to the cafeteria. Entering the cafeteria, Izuku sat down on one of the chairs and looked around and saw he was the only one there. It was good that his 6 eyes granted him enhanced brain processing power, and his mother and Aunt Mayako took it upon themselves to teach him advanced science at the tender age of 9. Bored out of his mind, Izuku decided to browse for the latest hero news. He looked at an article on his phone that said, Bone Crusher spotted in Britain. Bone Crusher was an American villain back in the day who had somehow recently escaped prison. His quirk allowed him to manipulate the bone structure of the body. Well, that's comforting, Izuku said with a bit of sarcasm in his voice. Turning off his phone, Izuku went to order food from Lunch Rush and maybe get his autograph. 10. Walking to the UA auditorium with a cocky grin on his face, Izuku got his number, which was 6,987. Izuku sat down and saw Present Mike, who was one of his favorite heroes. Izuku could proudly say he had listened to nearly all of the man's podcasts. Present Mike explained the rules, and soon enough, Izuku and other examinees were put on a bus to be sent off to the exam zones, all the while Izuku tried to keep his excitement in check. He was going to pass, and he knew it. He had trained practically his whole life for this moment, and he would not fail. Going through his stretches, Izuku spotted Uraraka doing breathing exercises. She was trembling, and Izuku decided that this was the perfect moment for him to cheer her up as well as apologize for his rude behavior earlier. He had not even taken 2 steps when someone decided to grab him, and although he saw the person in his periphery, he decided to let them touch him to see what they wanted. Izuku then saw a slightly taller boy looking at him with a stern glare. The girl is preparing to take this exam. Do you wish to distract? The boy froze when he saw the green hair and dark glasses staring at him. Midoriya, what are? I mean, it is a pleasant surprise to see you here. The boy sputtered, all the while doing a perfect 90-degree bow while chopping the air so fast it was like his arm was invisible. It's okay, Ida. It's completely fine to miss the green hair and dark sunglasses, Izuku said while pointing to himself. He turned around and looked for Uraraka, but it appeared she was gone. Sighing, he waved Ida goodbye while the boy was still karate chopping the air. Psyching himself, he went to the front before blazing off, leaving dust and wind in his wake. A purple-haired boy with eye bags under his eyes scowled as he watched Midoriya take off. Damn, this exam was made for people like him. People with powerful and flashy quirks. For a moment, the purple-haired resigned himself to his fate and contemplated going home, but his facial expression morphed into one of steely determination. No, I can't give up. Not like this. Well, what are you waiting for? Go, go, go. There are no countdowns in real life. Go. Present Mike called out to them. The examinees rushed only to see nothing but scrapes, bolts, and metal husks on the floor, and they could only stare in shock as they saw robot parts flying up in the air along with a loud sound of metal creaking. An orange-haired girl ran and enlarged her fists, and the examinees watched in shock as she chopped off the leg of a three-pointer and let it fall to the ground with a loud bang before swiftly moving again. Oh boy, we can't let them take all the P points. A blonde-haired boy cried out, and quickly followed, and soon all the examinees had dispersed to find points. 10. Izuku was honestly enjoying himself. But speaking truthfully, there was no other way to put his myriad of emotions into words or thoughts. He had removed his sunglasses, and his emerald eyes were on full display. Looking behind him, he saw a robot that had zoomed in on him. The boy in question simply smiled and pointed a finger in the direction of the robot, and suddenly a hole blew open in the middle of the robot's supposed torso. Moving faster than a blur, he destroyed a few robots in front of him by flying through them, as if they were made of paper, and while internally Izuku was excited and full of adrenaline on the outside, he managed to keep a calm and neutral demeanor. Appearing in front of a bunch of robots, he ripped off the head of the first robot before throwing it towards the second robot, and flying towards the third robot, he pointed out his palms, and the robot legs were enveloped in a faint blue energy, and then proceeded to fold in on itself like paper, causing the robot to fall on the ground with a loud thud. Straightening himself, he took a moment to observe his handwork, and all he saw were metal husks and scraps that made the whole place look like something out of Terminator or Transformers. Chuckling to himself, Izuku began to calculate the points he had accumulated, and he estimated around 100 points. He thought it was more than enough to get him in, but it was better safe than sorry, so Izuku decided to gather at least 70 more points before flying off in search of more robots. 10. Inside a dark room with numerous screens, several dark figures were visible watching the examinees. Wow, these students are much more promising than the one we had last year, don't you agree, Eraserhead? Present Mike said. Came the simple reply from the man that could be mistaken as something from The Walking Dead. Lighten up, Shoyuta, I know you didn't want to be here, but you're here now, no need to be such a hard ass. Came the snarky reply from the pro-hero Midnight. Eraserhead didn't reply. Instead, he focused on the screen, specifically on the son of Limitless. Limitless, you never told us your son was that powerful. Eraserhead leveled a light glare her way. Limitless in question simply shrugged before saying, well, my genes are impeccable. Eraserhead's glare increased, but Inko couldn't see it. Wow, I didn't know your son was that powerful. A skeletal man coughed out in shock, seeing Izuku destroy a three-pointer with just a flick of his finger. Such hot-blooded display of power and selflessness. It gets me. What? Eraserhead asked with a smirk underneath his mask. Midnight did not finish the sentence because of the deathly aura she suddenly felt. Ectoplasm and Present Mike were consoling Power Loader as he cried, watching his precious robots get thrashed around by kids. WHYYY. My precious robots. It's okay, Majima, they're just robots. Present Mike's comment did not help matters. In fact, they made it worse as Majima began to throttle Nizu while demanding a pay raise. Limitless, your son shows experience and no judgment issues, no over-reliance on quirk like the blonde kid in the other testing area. Just maybe your son has potential, Eraserhead said while looking at Izuku, who had paused momentarily and appeared to be counting something, most probably his points. Of course my son has potential. He learned from the best after all, and Inko's voice then took a dark turn into something much more threatening. Don't you dare think of expelling my son. Eraserhead gulped at the scathing glare sent his way, but didn't reply to her apparent threat. What's the boy's quirk anyway? Cementos asked. Oh, it's space manipulation. Inko replied, losing the glare and threatening face she had earlier, giving Eraserhead time to reprieve. Damn, that's one hell of a useful quirk, the Present Mike said, voicing the thoughts of all the teachers in that room. How many points has the kid racked up? Nizu, 13, who had not spoken till that moment, asked without her usual helmet on. Nizu, who had somehow recovered from the throttling earlier, tapped on the screen of a tab he was holding with his paw, and the examiner's score was on the screen, with Izuku Midoriya in the lead with 212 villain points. The hell? Midnight called out, looking at Izuku, who had stopped destroying robots and was helping other examinees. That K-Kid just broke your record, all might. 13 pointed at the skeletal blonde man in the corner, who was just as shocked as them. That's my boy Woo. Inko cheered on as she watched her son dominate the exam. Nizu, who had managed to keep his composure throughout, brought out a tab and began laughing in a way that sent shivers down the spine of the teachers before he composed himself. Well, I believe that it is time for the finale. Mwah. 10. Izuku, who was helping a purple-haired girl from being crushed, looked up as the voice of the present mic rang throughout the city. 2 more minutes, examinees. Damn, 13 minutes had passed already? A loud rumble shook the ground as the examinees stopped what they were doing, and what they saw terrified them. Towering over the faux buildings was a giant robot much larger than the ones they were previously fighting. With every step taken, it shook the ground, and the examines, Izuku included, started moving the other way. Damn, this thing looks expensive. Well, I've already gathered enough points to pass. No use destroying that thing, especially when it's about a minute left. He was about to fly away, but a scream calling for help forced him to stop and look back. Trapped underneath a pile of rube was Uraraka, the girl who had tried to befriend him earlier. Help! Uraraka screamed, but no other examinees seemed to care. Sighing, Izuku flew towards her and lifted the rubble of her body. Her legs were bent unnaturally, probably broken, and without a care in the world, Izuku lifted her bridal style before flying away. Dropping her in a safe place, Izuku flew back to where the zero-pointer was, intending on destroying that thing, but what he did not expect was for the robot to shrink. It continued to shrink until Izuku could no longer see the zero-pointer. Flying down to where the zero-pointer once stood, he saw a black-haired girl shrug while holding a miniature version of the zero-pointer. Looking at her with the 6 eyes, he saw that the energy around her hands expanded and contracted, and if he had to guess, her quirk had something to do with the shrinking and enlargement of objects. That's a pretty neat quirk, Izuku thought, while the black-haired girl just looked at him holding the zero-pointer like it was a toy. That's a pretty neat quirk you got there, Izuku said while trying to start a conversation with the girl. Now that Izuku could see her, she kind of looked like Momo, except she was less endowed. Shaking his head to get rid of such thoughts, Izuku looked and saw the students gathered around them. I'm Yui Kodai High, came the girl's monotone response. Izuku raised his eyebrows, but didn't comment on it. It looked like the girl wasn't the best when it came to social interactions. Well, it's not like he was very good either. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Izuku decided to introduce himself while saying "fuck it" in his head. And now, the test is over. Present Mick's voice rang out across the city. Her eyes widened, but before she could reply, a short elderly woman came who Izuku recognized as the youthful heroine Recovery Girl. Man, she needed to find herself a new name because girl and youthful rubbed off the wrong way at her age. Recovery Girl had been rather displeased with Nizu for endangering the lives of aspiring pro heroes, but granted, so were other teachers who were currently throttling the rat. Letting out a small chuckle, she walked over to Uraraka, who let out a small yelp upon recognizing her. Now, dearies, why don't we all calm down? Young lady, what seems to be the problem? She asked Uraraka with a gentle voice that could put a rampaging bear down. I think I broke my ankle when some debris landed on me. Recovery Girl then bent down and kissed her hands, and Achiko quickly fell unconscious as the healing process zapped some of her energy while mending her broken ankle. Now, children, stretch out your hands and have these, she said, dipping her hands into her pockets and pulling out some gummies and handing them over to the examinees. Izuku took some and absent-mindedly chewed it as he watched Achiko get put on a stretcher and carried away. He then saw a purple-haired boy scowling before he left, all the while muttering something to himself. He also saw Ida having a dejected look as he too turned around and left, but not before he shot him one last look. 10. Damn, Nizu. I knew you were crazy, but this is new. What the hell, man? Were you trying to kill them? Midnight said while shooting Nizu a very terrifying glare. Her glare along with the other glares sent Nizu's way, terrified the little creature. Never in his whole life had he felt a passive tingle such as this crawling up his spine. It wouldn't have killed them. If I sensed any of the students were in mortal danger, I would have shut down the robot. This seemed to calm down the teachers a little, but their glare never dissipated. And the zero-pointer was specifically designed to not put students in mortal danger. Their glare never dissipated, but they did visibly calm down at that statement. You better make sure that robot of yours is programmed well, Inko said, unknowingly voicing the thoughts of all the teachers. Nizu only gave a hollow smile at that statement. 10. Achiko felt nothing but exhaustion as she woke up. For a few seconds back there she thought that she was about to die. All the examinees had ignored her, and the rubble and debris had left her pinned underneath. She thought for a moment that she was home, but the white walls she woke up to reminded her otherwise. "Ah, you're finally awake." An old, familiar voice came from beside her. She looked over to see the short frame of recovery girl next to her bed, giving her a kind smile. That smile vanished, and a stern frown took its place. "I should be scolding you for overdoing it, but I really can't fault you entirely since the zero-pointer put you to flee or destroy it. And from what I saw when I watched the footage back, you did try to run and avoid fighting, but the rubble trapped you, preventing you from running." Achiko sighed in relief at narrowly avoiding the old woman's wrath. With that said, recovery girl continued before lightly whacking her on the head with her cane. She had spoken too soon. "You were on the brink of puking your guts out, young woman." "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. If I didn't push the dizziness, I wouldn't have gotten points," Achiko defended sheepishly. "I ought to have a long overdue with Nizu about teaching the concept of self-preservation," recovery girl said in a very stern tone that sent shivers down the spine of Achiko. "I do not want to see you till the sports festival." "Yes, ma'am." "It's yes, recovery girl, you hear me?" "Yes, I mean yes, recovery girl." "Well, since you are fine and awake now, I can let your visitors in," recovery girl said, snapping Achiko out of whatever thoughts she was having. "You can come in now," recovery girl said in a tone of resignation. The door creaked open, and all Achiko could see was green hair that stood for some seconds before coming in. "Midoriya?" Achiko could not help but squawk out. "Yeah, it's me. I saw what happened to you, and I just came to check on you to see if you were all right," Izuku said while rubbing the back of his head. "And I also came to apologize for what happened earlier. I just don't know what came over me, and for that, I say I'm sorry," Izuku said while slightly bowing. It's okay, you saved me after all, and I should be the one thanking you," Achiko said with a blush coloring her rosy cheeks. "Then what are we waiting for? I'm Izuku Midoriya," Izuku said, extending his arms for a handshake. She took the hand and shook it nervously, and suddenly the door opened, revealing Inko herself in full costume with contact lenses to cover up her eyes. Izuku did not even get the chance to react as she practically threw herself at him and trapped him in a bone-crushing hug. "Aiza-chan, you were so cool," she cried out. "My son is so damn cool. Mom, please air. He managed to wheeze out from his mother's bone-crushing hug. She let go of him before looking at Achiko, who was looking at them with wide eyes. Wait. You are a pro?" Achiko practically cried out. In a way, yes, because I work here," Inko simply replied, shrugging. None of the statements registered in Achiko's brain except the fact that Midoriya's mother was a pro hero. "You're the owner of Izanagi Cuisine, aren't you?" Achiko knew she was asking a frankly ridiculous question. There was nobody in Japan that did not know of Inko, the investor and businesswoman and one of the richest people in Japan. She felt very nervous talking to her, and finding out she was a pro hero amplified that nervousness tenfold. Yes, that would be me," Inko said with a casual shrug lacking the demeanor that rich people would normally carry. Achiko swallowed nervously and began fidgeting on the bed she was sitting on. "I saw what happened to you, Uraraka, is it not? Are you okay now?" "Yes, it's Uraraka, Achiko Uraraka, and thank you for your concern. I'm fine now," Achiko sputtered out nervously. "Oh, thank goodness. Me and Izuku here have been worried sick about you," she said while her face shifted into a sly grin. "Of course I'd worry about her. It's not every day you see somebody get their legs trapped underneath a pile of rubble," Izuku said in a sarcastic tone, deflecting his mother's teasing. "Sheesh, tough crowd." his mother said while rolling her eyes. So, Uraraka, you live around here? I mean, I and Izuku would love to invite you for dinner sometime, if it's okay with you, of course, Inko said, while having a kind smile on her face. I wouldn't want to bother. Achiko replied faithfully, but the rumbling, gentle sound of her stomach told her otherwise. Nonsense, it would be no bother at all. Inko replied with a sly grin on her face. It would be nice seeing Izuku have more friends his age. Recovery girl who saw and knew what Inko was trying to do turned away and started to snicker to herself, while Izuku looked at his mother with cold and calculating eyes, suspecting his mother was planning something. I don't even know if I should accept your offer. I'm not even certain I passed the UA exam, Achiko said with a somber tone. I'm certain you two passed. In fact, I think you both make a great team. Thanks. That means a lot to me. Her expression shifting into a slightly cheerful one. Even though you don't get accepted, which is unlikely based on your performance, I will still get you in. Mark my words, Inko said with a firm tone that left no room for questions or doubt. Mom, aren't you one of the people grading the exams? Why are you telling us? Izuku questioned. They didn't say I couldn't give you hints, and besides, we haven't started grading it yet, Inko replied with her trademark smile. So, Mrs. Midoriya, what is your hero name, and why haven't I heard of you? Achiko questioned with a raised eyebrow. I'm retired now, and when I was active my hero name was Limitless, and I was an underground hero because I was never really one for the spotlight, Inko answered. Achiko, meanwhile, was beyond starstruck. Her new friend was the son of a retired pro who had just offered to help her get into UA if she didn't make it in. And they were just being so chill about it, like they didn't just drop bombs on her. She refused to believe that what was happening was real, but a few pinches to her arm confirmed that it was indeed real life. So, are you coming over sometime for dinner or what? And it's completely fine if you decline, Inko asked, kindly distracting her yet again from her thoughts. Well, I guess I could accept, Achiko replied. Chapter 6, Logical Ruse. It had been 2 weeks since the entrance exam and almost a year since he cleaned Dagoba Beach. And now that he had nothing to do, Izuku sat on his chair with his legs crossed, binge-watching old pre-quirk era shows like Stranger Things and The Witcher when he heard his mother call his name. Izuku, it's here. Lazily turning his head and letting out a tired yawn was all he could muster in response. Izuku, your letter is here, he heard his mother call from the front door. Shooting up, he looked over the couch to see her walking toward him with the letter in hand. Your acceptance letter. It's here, she said, flashing him a grin. Collecting the letter, Izuku took a moment to stare at it. And while some people may have been nervous to open the letter, it wasn't Izuku, as the number of robots he had destroyed was more than enough to get him in, and he was pretty sure he did well on the written test. To him, opening the letter was a formality, as he knew that he had passed the damn thing with flying colors. I am here. As a projection. Putting the disc and letter down on the coffee table in front of him, he was taken by surprise when a holographic projection of none other than All Might appeared from the disc. Young Midoriya, I would be the one announcing the results, and I would say, you did pretty well on the written portion, scoring 97%, and while that would have been more than enough to get you a spot in the general education department, it doesn't end there. In the practical, you broke the record set by me, scoring a total of 212 villain points. Damn, I went overboard, was all Izuku could mutter comically. While that alone is more than enough to get you in the heroics course and put you in the first place, what kind of people would we be if we ignored a true hero in the making? All Might said, leaning towards the camera with his smile ever present on his face, and the video continued before Izuku could question any further. We were also looking for a true judge of character. People who would show the markings of a true hero on instinct, and that is why we have rescue points, and you, Izuku Midoriya, have earned 45 rescue points. The camera then cuts to the times during the entrance exam when he saved fellow candidates from being crushed or just helping them in general. With a total of 257 points, I am here to inform you that you have passed the exam with a comfortable first place. It would be my pleasure to inform you. Welcome to your Hero Academia, young Midoriya. The camera then cut again and showed the rankings, with Izuku in first with 212 villain points and 45 rescue points, and Yui Kodai Second with 50 villain points and 50 rescue points, Katsuki Bakugo. Third with 77 villain points and 0 rescue points, Ibara Shizuki. And fourth with 38 villain points and 32 rescue points, and Itsuka Kendo. And fifth with 45 villain points and 22 rescue points, but one name stood out to him. Achiko Uraraka was in 9th place with 30 villain points and 22 rescue points. So she passed, huh? With that, the projection ended and Izuku could not help the small smirk that his mouth had twisted into. And looking back, he saw his mother looking at the table with a neutral expression. "Congratulations," was all she said before walking out like she knew Izuku was going to pass. "I wonder if Momo passed," was all Izuku could think, and on instinct, he reached for his phone, but decided to call her later instead, putting the phone in his pocket before grabbing his green hoodie on the rack close to the entrance of the house and putting it on. He decided to go to the arcade and play some games as a form of celebration. "Mom, I'm going to the arcade," he told his mom, as he did not want her to worry about where he was. "Okay, but come back before dinner, I'm making katsudon," came his mother's reply. Not replying, but getting her message, he grabbed his shoes before sliding the door open and going out. 10. Bakugo was having a good day. He had dominated the exam and aced the written test, showing the fucking extras their place. He remembered the thrill, the adrenaline that pumped through his veins as he blasted those robots to fucking bits. He was the goddamn best, and nothing would ever change that fucking fact. So when his old hag called him to see his entrance exam results, he walked down the stairs with a certain swagger as he went to open the formality, as he already knew he had passed the fucking exam. The fucking exam was his first to surpass All Might and being the greatest hero this goddamn world has ever seen. So, when the letter from UA finally came in the mail, he knew it was simply a formality. He destroyed the most robots in his zone, and the written test was a piece of cake. The envelope contained a disc and a formal letter, so he pressed play on the disc, and a holographic projection of All Might appeared. Now he was stoked. All Might himself was telling him how well he did. It was the first step on his path to surpassing All Might, and no one would stop him. "With a total of 77 points, I am here to inform you that you have passed the exam with 3rd place in the rankings. It would be my pleasure to inform you. Welcome to your hero academia, young Bakugo." Now, Bakugo was appalled as the words 3rd place constantly rang in his mind, and he didn't even register when the audio went off and decided to do the most sensible thing and restart the recording and forwarded it to the rankings, where he heard All Might tell him he got 3rd place. No, he did not trash those robots and annihilate the competition just to come in 3rd, right? The projection shut off again, and Bakugo's mind was stuck in the simple, almost alien detail of him getting 3rd place. Not 2nd place, not 1st place, 3rd. He grabbed the disc again, and for the 3rd time restarted and fast-forwarded it to see the rankings, and who in fuck's name stole his spotlight, and the name atop the rankings with 257 points was none other than Izuku Midoriya, and second was Yui Kodai with 100 points. Bakugo destroyed the disc with an explosion-powered punch before tossing the smoking pieces away. Now he was beyond pissed. A girl in Deku of all people had outclassed him. The future #1 hero. Hell no, this would not stand. He remembered vaguely that Kodai and he went to the same elementary and middle school, but he never took notice of her in middle school thanks to her antisocial personality. And Deku, that fucking bozo, had, even while quirkless, exuded confidence that rivaled fucking All Might. And his old hag constantly warned him not to get on Deku's bad side. But when he disobeyed his old hag, Deku manifested his quirk and then promptly dropped off the face of the earth for 11 years. He remembered the scolding his old hag, and even his old man gave him for trying to teach a quirkless fucker his goddamn place. And then the fucker finally showed up after 11 years, and he stole his spotlight. "DKU, I am the future #1, you hear me, motherfucker. When I see you, I'll murder you. Enjoy your fucking victory while you still can, cuz soon, I will put you in your fucking place. You hear me, you shitty fucking DKU." Bakugo ranted with an insane gleam in his eyes. "What are you screaming up there, brat? Did you fail the exam?" Mistuki's voice rang from downstairs. "Fuck no," came Bakugo's simple reply. "Language. And why the hell are screaming if you didn't fail?" "None of your goddamn business, you shitty old hag." The only thing Katsuki heard after that was his mother's footsteps before she barged inside his room with a pissed-off expression written all over her face. Fuck, he should have closed his door. 10. Izuku was walking home from the arcade when suddenly his phone started ringing. He picked up the call, and Momo's excited voice was all he could hear. Izuku, I got in. Congrats, Momo. Izuku replied cheerfully. Did you get in? Izuku smirked and said, Of course. Did you even doubt for a moment that I wouldn't get in? Of course. Who am I even asking? But congratulations on scoring the highest entrance examination points. Izuku laughed, but then a realization struck him. How did you know I scored the highest? It's kind of hard not to hear those kinds of rumors, Izuku. It's what everyone is talking about. Damn, I went overboard with it. I planned to score at least 100 points initially, but I decided to add an extra 70 points, and I guess I lost track. The lack of reply made Izuku wonder what she was thinking about. Anyway, want to go for a cup of coffee? Tomorrow, perhaps. I would be busy today as my mom is hosting some relatives from overseas. Sure, I'll text you the place. 10. 3 months later. Izuku stood in the mirror as he did some last-minute preparations. He checked to see if he had taken everything or not. Once done, he walked to the mirror to check himself over. He had grown 2 inches in the last 3 months, making him 180 centimeters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall. And he still had more years to grow. If his height increased at this rate, by the end of his 18th birthday, he would stand at least 195 centimeters, 6 feet 5 inches. And although he wasn't as tall as his mother, who stood at a towering 185 centimeters, 6 feet 1 inch, his current height was still well above average. Yue had sent their uniform a week ago through the parcel. It was a gray jacket with blue-green stripes and dark turquoise trimmings over a white long-sleeved shirt, dark blue pants, and a red tie. Izuku looked at himself again in the mirror. He had gotten a new haircut and tamed his wild hair, allowing it to fall to the base of his neck, and he wore the a uniform, although the pants were adjusted to be slim fit, and the red tie was knotted properly around his neck, complete with a casual black lace-up sneakers. Instead of wearing his usual glasses, he wore a black blindfold over his eyes which propped up his hair, giving it a spiky appearance, easily adding another 2 inches to his height. He then walked to the front door, where he saw his mother standing. The uniform really suits you, Izuku. Thanks, but I think we should be going now. Izuku replied, trying his best not to sound exasperated. Sure thing. Just let me grab my keys. 10. Izuku walked through the halls of with practiced ease to find his classroom, Class 1A, with his hands in his pockets and his sling backpack hung over his shoulders. Momo had called him and told him that she had gotten to school less than an hour ago, and Izuku was sure he could make it at least 10 minutes before homeroom started. Good thing he knew the way around, because this place was a fucking maze. Getting to the Class 1A, he saw how large the door was, and all he could do was marvel at how Yue didn't play around in architecture even though the school was too big. Damn, Yue has a lot of money. Wonder if they built it for people with mutant quirks. Deciding not to stand around any further, he opened the door and saw people chattering around, including some familiar people. Take your legs off this desk this instant. It is unbecoming of us freshmen to vandalize the desk our predecessors have sat on. Lita ranted on to Bakugo, who seemed pissed off while continuously karate chopping his arms. Izuku felt exhausted already. He could only hope the rest of his classmates weren't like those two. And who the fuck do you think you are, you damn extra? I'll blow your ass to kingdom come. With a resigned sigh, he stepped into the just about half-full classroom, tuning out the argument between them and scanning the room. His eyes immediately landed on a yellow sleeping bag behind the podium in the front of the classroom, and the face of a scraggly, dark-haired man poked out of it. They stared at each other for a few seconds before Izuku shrugged and walked away toward his seat. He recognized the man as Eraserhead, but frankly hadn't done much research on him other than to satisfy his curiosity. Going to his assigned seat, which was behind a white and red-haired boy, Izuku sat down before seeing Momo behind him without turning his back. Turning back, he saw her smile and give a small wave of acknowledgement. The multicolored-haired boy turned back before greeting him in a monotone voice. Midoriya, he said, and his neutral face made it hard to tell what he was thinking. Oh hey Shoto, you passed. But to be honest, I didn't expect to see you in Class 1A. How were the exams? Izuku inquired curiously. It was fine, was Todoroki's neutral response. Having nothing else to say, Todoroki simply turned around to mind his own business. Deku, a low growl from Bakugo, pulled him out of his thoughts. Slowly meeting the intense, piercing red eyes of the blonde filled with barely restrained indignation, Izuku was at a complete loss for what to say to him. Their last meeting hadn't been stellar, and it had been more than a decade since then. He had no idea if Bakugo had changed or if he still hated his guts and wanted to kill him, or maybe he was just a misguided tsundere the entire time who just couldn't properly express his feelings. Regardless, Izuku made a mental note to avoid him. Before Bakugo could say anything, someone dashed in front of him while chopping his hands. Midoriya, I must apologize for my behavior at the entrance exam, he solemnly began. It was unbecoming of a future hero to cast judgment upon you before even speaking to you. You figured out the rescue points better than I ever could. I was very impressed by your record-breaking achievement at the entrance exams, Midoriya, Ida stated, and Izuku could only groan in response, aggravating a certain as ash blonde. It's him, the record holder. A red-haired teen spoke as he recognized Izuku's name. TCH. Bakugo scowled at Izuku from across the classroom. All of the others, students in the classroom, the majority based on the fact that only a few seats were empty, looked towards him at the same time. Hi. Izuku greeted the class as a whole. He wasn't used to having so much attention on him all at once. So he's the guy that scored even more than All Might? A boy with a literal bird head said to a blonde guy with a black, lightning bolt-like streak in his hair. No way, are you for real? The blonde replied, looking between Izuku and the redhead. I heard the old record was like 161 or something. And thanks for saving me during the exam, by the way, a purple-haired girl mentioned as she looked over at Izuku. I saw the list for the entrance exam. He got 257 on it. Karo, a vedette girl with long hair and large eyes, commented. That's crazy. A short boy with purple balls on his head piped up. The name's Ejiru Kirishima. You were so manly in the entrance exam, Kirishima said, thankfully saving Izuku from more questions. Thanks, Kirishima-san. No need for formalities. After all, we're going to be in the same class. The now-named Kirishima spoke boisterously. Lita-san, it's nice to see you here, Momo said cheerfully, noticing her former classmate while waving her hands. Likewise Yairza-san, Lita replied happily before doing a perfect 90-degree bow. You two know each other? Todoroki questioned while raising an eyebrow. We're from the same middle school. Am I right? Todoroki asked, but before Momo could reply, Bakugo decided to chime in. Am I? No wonder Four Eyes over there thinks he can tell me what to do. Just because you attended some shitty school for rich kids, you think you're a fucking elitist? I'll blow you to bits. Such uncouth language. Do you really wish to become a hero? Lita asked, appalled by the foul words coming out of this aspiring pro-hero's mouth. You'll get used to it, Lita-san, Momo said casually with a hand wave, trying to console Lita, who was now looking like a gaping fish. Shut it, big tits. Why you? While Momo was having a glaring contest with Bakugo, Izuku and Todoroki simply minded their own business like they'd seen what was going on here before. All the chattering students had by now stopped to look around and see who was shouting cuss words at the top of their voice. Izuku could now feel the whole class's attention directed towards them, and it was just the first day. Way to go. It's just the first day, and you kids have already found ways to make me lose sleep. A tired voice came from the sleeping bag on the floor. It opened, revealing a shaggy-haired man who was sipping a juice pouch, looking like a small gust of wind would knock him over. The attention of the entire classroom snapped to the front, where a yellow sleeping bag was lying abandoned on the floor, and Aizawa stood before them with a flat, unimpressed glare. Everyone who wasn't already in their seat quickly rushed to it, and they all silently waited for their homeroom to begin. It took you all 8 seconds to get yourselves in order. Such a lengthy waste of time could cost lives in the field. I expect it to improve, he plainly stated, his glare never wavering as he reached behind the podium and pulled out a blue pea uniform. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Put these on and follow me to the PE fields. 10. The Department of Education mandates that students not use their quirks when conducting fitness tests in middle school. Aizawa began in his signature straightforward manner. It's the height of irrationality. It gives the impression that everyone is equal when that just isn't the case, for better or for worse. Today, we'll be conducting a quirk apprehension test. Murmurs broke out among the students before an orange-haired girl raised her hands. Yes, what is it? Aizawa asked in his usual bored tone. Sir, what about orientation and… Kendo questioned, but she was cut off by Aizawa with a simple hand wave. UA isn't like your traditional school in a lot of aspects, and one of those aspects gives teachers leeway to handle their classes and students however they see fit. Heroes don't have time for inconsequential things like orientation, he answered before shifting his attention to Izuku. Midoriya, you ranked first in the entrance exam. How far could you throw in middle school? He said, ignoring or not noticing Bakugo cringe at the mention of Izuku's name in the first place. 500 meters, give or take. Without your quirk. As I said, 500 meters. 500 meters? The whole class, besides Ida and Momo, exclaimed in fascination. To think that someone could throw that far without even using their quirk. Some even had a look of smug disbelief plastered on their faces. Aizawa, with an expectorated look, pointed at the circle. Right. Walk up to the circle and throw this ball. The pro hero threw a ball at Izuku, which stopped a few inches away from him. Taking the ball, he examined it before walking inside the circle, reinforcing the ball with cursed energy. He took a pitcher's stance before throwing it as hard as he could, but a second away from throwing it, the energy covering his hands flashed black, and he threw as hard as he could, kicking up dust in the process. In less than a second, the ball had broken the sound barrier and disappeared from view. Aizawa held up the machine in his hands, and a few seconds later the machine beeped, and for a brief blink it and miss it moment his eyes widened, showing surprise before settling back into his tired and bored look. The distance calculator showed 2,509.79 meters. 3 kilometers? Bakugo exclaimed in disbelief. How the hell did you do that? Aizawa ignored Bakugo and said, this is what you are capable of achieving when you use your quirk. Midoriya's score increased multiple times. You all will be going through these simple tests with your quirks. Whoa! A pink-skinned girl exclaimed joyfully. We will be able to use our quirks? This is going to be fun. Aizawa's eyes narrowed dangerously as he stared at the girl. Fun, you say? Aizawa questioned, with the word fun rolling off his tongue like it was an alien word. Don't tell me you were planning on having fun for 3 years here at UA. You know, let's make this more fun. Whoever comes in last, he said, flashing his signature grin, would be deemed to have no potential and would be expelled. That's not fair. We just got here, and you're threatening to expel one of us on the first day. Ochako indignantly cried out. Fair? Aizawa scoffed. Are natural disasters fair? Villain attacks on civilians? Targeting a hero's family or catching them specifically on their day off, is that fair? There's nothing fair about life or heroics. Take it or leave it. Okay, Aizawa made some pretty decent points, as being a hero wasn't all shits and giggles. Some consequences and risks came with the job. Taking a look at his classmates, Izuku saw Momo and Todoroki looking indifferent while Ochako and Lita had hardened their resolve. The first test was a 50-meter dash. Ida was called up to begin alongside a girl with what appeared to be a frog mutation quirk. He would be lying if he said he wasn't excited to see his classmates' quirks in action, but seeing him practically become a blur across the 50-meter track to finish in only 2.45 seconds was incredible to Izuku. Azui wasn't far behind, coming in at 4.58 seconds. Izuku watched with interest as he saw his classmates use creative ways to complete the 50-meter dash. Ochako lightened her clothes and completed the dash in under 7 seconds, while a fawn-haired girl who ran alongside Ochako completed the race in 5 seconds. He watched as a blonde-haired boy propelled himself with his naval lasers across the track. Bakugo, Midoriya, your turn, Aizawa called out to them. Izuku walked to the track and began stretching, and Bakugo walked next to him, glaring and readying his palms behind him. You think you're so cool, huh, Deku? Bakugo snarled. Just watch as I crush this test and put you and the rest of these fucking extras in your goddamn place. Sure, whatever you say. Izuku replied, not even bothering to hide the irritation and indifference in his voice. Izuku's response only served to infuriate the explosive blonde further, but he didn't retort, deciding to let actions speak louder than words. The moment the signal went off, Izuku used blue for short-range, instantaneous movement and dashed to the end of the track, and when he stopped he turned and saw Bakugo lagging behind him before the boy finally used his explosions to make it to the end of the track. Midoriya 0.58 seconds. Bakugo 4.13 seconds. Shock-filled cries erupted from his classmates as the machine declared the time. Bakugo's eyes widened in shock as Izuku walked back to his friends while smirking at their shocked faces. The only people who weren't shocked or showed indifference were Momo and Todoroki. Holy shit, that was like totes fast. I didn't see anything. What's your quirk, pretty boy? The fawn-haired girl who had competed with Uraraka came up to him to ask. Space manipulation. What's your name, by the way, pretty girl? Izuku replied, smirking. Utsushimi Kami, she said with a tint of red on her face at being called pretty. Izuku Midoriya, Izuku said, deciding to introduce himself. Your eyes? Why'd you cover them? Kami asked, her tone laced with curiosity. I have enhanced eyesight and leaving them uncovered is kind of a pain, Izuku said, pointing towards his eyes. That's like totes amazing, the fawn-haired girl exclaimed, her eyes wide and a smile on her face. Thanks, I guess, Izuku said, confused by her over-the-top accent, as well as her complimenting his quirk's drawback. So what can you do with your quirk? Is it like the prison hero, Space Lock, or is it like Rock Lock, or? She asked back-to-back questions with never-ending curiosity. Izuku turned just in time to see Todoroki and Yaoyorozu about to take the 50-meter dash. Yaoyorozu created skates with her quirk, which she used to cruise the track in 4.40 seconds, while Todoroki used his ice to slide across a second before her at 3.37 seconds. Izuku shrugged at Kami's question before deciding to answer. My quirk allows me to manipulate space for a variety of effects. I can use it to stop, attract, fly, and levitate. Well, you get the point. Wow, that's so lit, Kami replied with literal stars in her eyes. Your quirk is like totes cooler than mine. If Izuku noticed her over-the-top teenage accent, he didn't comment on it. What's your quirk anyway? It's called glamour. I can use it to create images of things that aren't actually there. Like illusions? Yep, like illusions. Wait, are you related to the pro-hero mystic? That obvious, huh? She's my elder sister, Kami said while her face looked like she was lost in her thoughts. Wow, your quirk is cool no matter what anyone says, Utsushimi-san. Don't sell yourself short, as your quirk, while not overly flashy or combat-oriented, is pretty useful with stealth missions, and with the right application could be a pretty deadly quirk. Thanks, Midoriya, Kami replied, now smiling. Please, just call me Kami, no need to be so formal. Grinny. You know your hair's like totes the right shade of green, and it's spiked up like a paintbrush, she said, snickering with her hands over her mouth. As interesting as Midoriya's quirk is, we have tests to finish, Aizawa spoke up, and the two students snapped to attention. Izuku watched on, trying to commit quirks to memory as the rest of the class finished their 50-meter dash. Call me Izuku then, Izuku said, walking away while giving her a thumbs up. 10. The next event was grip strength. On a raw strength basis, the most impressive was Mizo Shoji, who scored about 540 kg. Momo once again demonstrated her quirk's versatility and creativity by designing a pair of gloves with hydraulic pistons attached to them. It had increased her grip strength, allowing her to score 300 kg. Next was Kendo, who increased the size of her fists and scored an impressive 350 kg. Achiko and Jairu had not performed well in grip strength, with Achiko scoring 50 kg and Jairu scoring 45 kg. Ida had somehow scored 100 kilograms, which was impressive in itself. Kami had trained for someone whose quirk wasn't strength-oriented, scoring an impressive 79 kilograms. When Izuku's turn came, he applied blue around the device's grip to constrict its space before crushing it completely. The device beeped loudly and displayed 999 kg. Once again, the entire class was shocked by the result. How could someone's quirk be that powerful? 10. The next few events went by with Izuku dominating nearly the whole test, much to the chagrin of Bakugo. During the endurance run, Izuku came in first using Infinity to fly out, running everyone by at least an hour. Momo created an electric scooter and came in second, while Todoroki came in third sliding on his ice, and Bakugo came in a close fourth propelling himself with his explosions. The frog-like girl had outperformed Kendo, Achiko, and Kami. During the long jump, Izuku was fascinated as he watched Achiko make herself weightless and cross the sandpit in one jump. Another one was the blonde-haired boy who used his naval lasers to propel himself across the pit, and the frog girl crossed the sand pit in one leap. When Izuku's turn came, he simply used his quirk to fly across the sand pit. The next event was repeated side steps. His years of dodge training helped immensely in the repeated side steps. Trauma notwithstanding, the short boy with balls for hair was the undisputed leader in that event by using his quirk as trampolines to bounce between. The ball throw was next, and Izuku was allowed to sit back as he had performed the event before and watch the others take it. There were only a few standouts. Bakugo unleashed a massive explosion while yelling "die," and was promptly seething that his impressive score of 705.2 meters was less than his score. He watched as JUJUTSU pulled an entire cannon from her midsection and launched the ball with it. Then, there was Achiko, who just negated the gravity of the ball and tossed it into orbit. Everyone was shocked as the teacher gave her a score of infinity. The only test that Izuku couldn't use his quirk were the repeated side steps, sitting toe touch, and sit-ups, as he couldn't figure out how to incorporate his quirk in those tests, although he did get a high score. 10. Displaying all of the individual scores would be a waste of time. So here are the cumulative rankings. Aizawa drawled and displayed a holographic list from the device he used to measure their scores. Izuku checked the list and was unsurprising. His name was in first place with JUJUTSU in second, Todoroki in third, and Bakugo in fourth. Izuku looked further down and saw the name Minoru Mineta in 20th place. The horrified look on the diminutive boy's face said it all, and Izuku couldn't help but feel a little pity at the boy's fate. Passing the entrance exam and entering your dream school only to end up expelled on the first day. Fourth? Fucking fourth. Forget first place. I didn't even get second. Fucking DKU beat me again. The explosive teen was boiling mad. DKU. Izuku looked to his right and saw Bakugo charging towards him like a rabid dog with his palms ready to blast Izuku to Kingdom Come. But upon getting towards Izuku, Bakugo slammed into an invisible wall. Raising his arms, he tried to blast Izuku, but nothing came out, and then what looked like a rope came out of nowhere and wrapped around the snarling Bakugo. Managing to turn his head around, he saw Aizawa looking at him with a pissed-off expression, and his hair was raised with his eyes signaling he was using his quirk. It would do you well to quiet down, Bakugo. You have a good quirk, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over expelling someone like you. Aizawa reprimanded him in a very stern tone before releasing him and restoring his quirk. Thankfully, Bakugo was sensible enough not to try and attack Izuku, as it would put a permanent black mark on his record, but he silently seethed on how Izuku made him look like a fool in front of the extras. What a prick, Izuku thought as Bakugo looked at him like he wanted to kill him. Well, there went the misguided Tsundere theory. By the way, I lied. No one is getting expelled today, Aizawa said, smirking at their shocked faces. It was just a ruse to get you all to be on your toes and try your best. You're all safe. For now, Aizawa drawled out, returning to his usual bored face. The class immediately deflated, the tension leaving them, and a few of the more social teens perked back up to talk amongst each other. Momo couldn't help the tiny little scoff that escaped from her. Well, of course it was. It should have been obvious if you just thought it through. She mumbled to herself. Maybe I should have said something? She mused to herself. No, you're wrong there, Momo. Izuku knew something was amiss. This is the same man who had expelled his students in 2 weeks, claiming they had no potential. What makes them so different? Aizawa-sensei, You've expelled over 150 students in your time working here, including the last semester who you expelled in under 2 weeks claiming they had no potential. What makes us different? We're heroes in training, and we can handle the truth, sensei. Izuku, what are you doing? Momo couldn't help but ask, but she was ignored. Aizawa stared at him, but Izuku didn't flinch. Finally, Aizawa closed his eyes and flashed a smile. All right then, Midoriya. Have it your way. He opened his eyes and glared at Mineta and said student flinched and stiffened up in terror. I was not lying about someone being expelled. In my time here, I've expelled 154 students. Last semester I expelled my entire class in just under 2 weeks. Momo's eyes went wide in terror, and she took a half step back, covering her lips with her hand. Understand this. The only reason none of you are going home today is because I see potential in all of you. If I thought you had no prospects at all, I would have cut you loose immediately. There is nothing crueler than letting someone chase around a half-baked dream. The entire class was shivering under his words, which doubled when he addressed them all. And that goes for each and every one of you. If I feel you're slacking off and not being serious about your position here, I would kick you out so fast it would have your head spinning. He stared all of them down, and they all trembled before him. Any other questions? No, sensei. All the students replied, terrified at what they heard. Good, you're dismissed. With that said, he turned around and the students left. I thought I had it figured out. I was so sure. Momo mumbled in a downcast tone to Izuku. It's okay, Momo. This man is an underground hero, and if not for the fact my mother works here and tells me about him, I wouldn't have figured it out either. Several people had lost feeling in their legs and slumped to the floor, hearts racing and adrenaline pumping. Except for a few who weren't affected by the speech left quickly, making it a much subdued group that finally made it back to 1A. Chapter 7. Reunion and Revelations. After the quirk apprehension test, Aizawa walked calmly back to class with his hands in his pockets when he spotted All Might in all his grandeur staring down at him with his blinding smile ever present on his face. Hello, Eraserhead, All Might said while waving his hands awkwardly. Did any of the kids catch your interest? Aizawa drawled out in his usual bored tone. What do you mean? All Might asked, confused by Aizawa's question. You know, I wonder how you got your spot as the #1 hero if you're that terrible in stealth. Aizawa mused aloud, although to whom was unclear. How did you know? All Might asked, surprised that Aizawa could figure out that easily he was spying on the kids. It wasn't hard. I wonder why none of the kids called you out or noticed you were spying on them. Why you were even spying on us is none of my business. Just answer the question I asked in the beginning. Well, all of the kids caught my interest in their way with their unique abilities. But seriously, that was quite the stunt you pulled, threatening to expel kids on their first day. If you had paid attention to what I said, you'd know that it wasn't a threat, Aizawa said, turning away from All Might. He then turned back and said, You're hosting the orientations along with Nizu later today, so if I were you, I'd use my time more rationally. He then walked away, leaving All Might alone in the hallway. All Might clutched the place where his wound was, reminding himself of his time limit now. That was one of the reasons he spied on Class 1A, to gauge their quirk and abilities and to see if any of them was worthy to inherit one for all, but there was a voice in the back of his mind telling him to do otherwise. All for one is dead, so I should probably let one for all die with me. He then walked away with a slightly downcast face while thinking, what would Master think of me now? 10. The next day was a return to the usual school schedule that Izuku didn't miss very much, and since JUJUTSU was a school that combined high school, university, and hero training curriculum in synchrony, it made everything twice as difficult. No wonder UA had such a low acceptance rate, but he agreed that having pro heroes for teachers was certainly cool, though, and he didn't think that the novelty of that would wear off anytime soon. But now was his favorite class of the day, foundational or practical heroics class, and it was being taught by All Might himself, not that any of his classmates knew. Izuku wondered what it would be like being taught by All Might himself. All Might was employed 11 years ago, shortly before he disappeared from the spotlight for an extended period, and the Hero Commission claimed that All Might was busy on vacation learning, teaching experience. All Might's presence alone boosted UA applicants every year by a considerable margin, and even after his return to the spotlight, he spent less and less time fighting crime with the excuse of training the next generation, but All Might never spent time at UA Talk less of teaching despite being employed for 11 years, which meant he had the barest minimum of teaching experience. Izuku nearly facepalmed himself for not deducing this simple fact earlier, and suddenly, he found himself less enthusiastic for his next class, but before he could go down that rabbit hole, All Might made himself known through his boisterous aura. I am here, walking through the door like a normal person. Holy crap. Is that his Silver Age costume? That's not how a normal person walks through a door, Karo. Azui ever the blunt one interjected. All Might, who heard Azui's statement, rephrased himself saying, I am here, walking through the door like a weird person, earning a chuckle from the class. All right, young zygotes, are you ready for hero training? Please change into your costumes in the locker room and meet me on the ground beta. 10. Izuku stood in the locker room and pressed a button on a wall, and a panel in the wall opened to show a case containing his costume. He grabbed the case containing his costume. He began preparing to change for his first practical lesson in heroics. Izuku sat on a bench and stared down at the unopened case holding his costume. When he first drew up a design at the age of 4, it was heavily inspired by All Might. It even included a cowl with 2 long appendages that were supposed to be reminiscent of All Might's 2 signature locks of hair. As he grew and his hero worship of All Might slowly diminished into something less fanatical, he revisited and completely reworked the costume idea. What came out as a result was a black zip-up jacket with a fairly wide high collar along with slim-fit matching black pants, black combat boots along a black blindfold. When Izuku awakened his quirk, over time many of his old habits started to disappear. His stuttering, his use of his hero analysis notebooks, and his muttering all disappeared, although his muttering still happened in his mind. A characteristic he shared with his mother, who tended to go off on what she called mental muttering. And thanks to his 6 eyes, he no longer saw the use of writing about useful quirks in a notebook when he could decipher them with a simple glance. And since his quirk offered him the ultimate defensive and offensive power, he became less creative for flashy costumes, instead opting for stealth. After getting dressed into his costume, he started to make his way toward ground beta, noticing someone begin to walk in step with him. You know, I was expecting a bit more creativity from the record breaker. A blonde person with a lightning streak on his hair playfully commented. He was Kaminari, he believed, if he wasn't mistaken. From behind his blindfold, Izuku's eyes twitched at the mention of the record breaker before responding. My quirk provides enough protection. Adding any other thing would only be overkill. Nice costume, by the way, Izuku said half-heartedly, referring to his simple costume of a plain white t-shirt, black joggers, and a jacket with white outlines resembling lightning bolts. It's as plain as they come, Kaminari said lazily, referring to his costume. Nice costume, though I was expecting a bit more color, Ochiko chirped behind him. Thanks, and I can see the space motif you were going for. Ochiko beamed at the recognition, and then her smile faltered a bit. I'm glad you noticed. I wanted something a little more puffy, though, sort of like 13's suit. This one's a little skin tight. Momo then walked behind him, and her costume was on full display. It was a red skin-tight zip-up bodysuit with a yellow utility belt, futuristic white combat boots, and forearm bracelets. I must say, Izuku, you choose practicality over impact. Seems like a truly wise decision. I wish I would have thought the same. Although it is a nice costume, but I thought you'd be going for something like your mother's costume, Momo said, walking beside him while eyeing him playfully. Well, my mother's costume isn't my type. I don't know why she even included the gauntlets, and speaking of gauntlets, Izuku said, pointing towards Momo's bracelets. What exactly are those for? Costume, Auntie Inko is a fucking pro? Was the thought of Bakugo, who happened to have overheard their conversation. Oh, these are just a digitalized version of my Yeo Rictionary, Momo said, smiling like a kid showing off their toy. Yeo Rictionary? Isn't that the chemistry notebook for your formulas? Yes, and this digitalized version allows me access to the internet, gives me molecular formula of things I don't know, Momo said, rambling on about her digitalized Yeo Rictionary. All Might cut into their radically different rumination by explaining what their first class would be, a battle trial. He explained, with the help of cue cards, that the class would be divided into teams of 2. The teams would face off against each other in a mock scenario where one team played the role of villains holding a large bomb within a building, and the other team would play the role of heroes attempting to thwart them. After his explanation, some people decided to voice their complaints. Is it truly all right to decide at random? Wouldn't it have been better to just have us form pairs? Lita asked intensely while raising his hands. Izuku answered before the hero could. It is to simulate a real-life situation. Heroes often don't get to choose who their partners are when disaster strikes. This is to teach us to plan on the fly and to think how we can combine our powers. All Might looked impressed, as did some of Izuku's classmates. He then held out a box for them to draw lots for what team they'd be a part of, and Izuku found himself on Team J. He looked to Achiko, but she, unfortunately, was on Team C and Momo was on Team D. He looked around for his partner as the class started to group up, and he saw Kendo, if he wasn't mistaken, walking up to him with a friendly smile. "You're on Team J, right?" Izuku inquired with a raised eyebrow behind his blindfold. "Yup, guess we're partners for today," Kendo said excitedly. Izuku blinked, and then he returned the smile she was sending him. "I guess we are." Kendo's costume was a loose, long-sleeved bodysuit with a knee-length sleeveless turquoise qipao worn over the black bodysuit, and over the qipao, she wore a loose brown utility belt around her waist with a thin black domino mask with goggles around her eyes, and white navy blue boots with wide vamps that reached down to her toes, filled in with white slips and black fingerless gloves. Overall, it was a very well-thought-out costume. "Now, for the first group," All Might bellowed as he reached into a box with labeled slips of paper. "The hero team will be Team J." "Well then, we have to go first," Kendo said while Izuku focused his eyes on the box in All Might's hands. "And the villain team will be Team B." Izuku looked around for any team to perk up in acknowledgement, and his eyes landed on the feral grin of Bakugo and the indecipherable stare of Lita from behind his mask directed back at him. "The fuck?" was the only thing Izuku could mutter at that moment. 10. Inko walked to Nizu's office for a short meeting. She was on her break, and as much as she wanted to sit in the teacher's lounge and pretend not to know about midnight fawning over her or listening in on students' conversations, she had important things to discuss with Nizu, and the fact that he didn't text her the details or discuss it over the phone proved it was very important. After purposely delaying for about 10 minutes, she decided to go to his office, and upon getting to Nizu's office, she was about to knock on the door before she heard an enthusiastic "come in" from inside. She opened the door and saw Nizu sitting down arranging some paperwork before deciding to put a paperweight on it. "Mikumo, I'm glad you could make it, and right on time too," Nizu said with his trademark smile. "You were expecting me now?" Inko couldn't even mask her surprise. "Well, your break would be the best time to see me, so." He paused, letting Inko piece it together. "Anyway, please have a seat," he said, pointing to the seat across his table. "Before we begin, would you like anything?" Nizu says cheerfully. In his pause, he's holding a teapot. "Tea?" "Sure, give me 4 tablespoons of sugar." Inko drawled out as she sat on the chair. Nizu dumps in 4 cubes of sugar before handing it over to her. "That's quite a lot of sugar," Nizu remarked while Inko took a sip from her tea. I have a bit of a sweet tooth," Inko replied dismissively. "A bit?" Nizu asked. He was sure if he had eyebrows, he'd be raising them in doubt right now. Deciding to ignore that and go straight to the main issue, he brought out an envelope with a red seal on it before handing it to Inko, who took it and opened the envelope. "Is this about the MLA?" Inko asked while bringing out the contents of the envelope, which was a bunch of pictures. "Yes, I have found a new lead, and from what I've seen it seems war may be coming sooner than anticipated," Nizu said in his usual predatory tone. Inko brought the contents of the envelope to eye level, which was a bunch of pictures of men in suits meeting with each other and shaking hands, and a news article that reported about increased Detnerat presence in Daika City. "What are these for exactly?" Inko asked, suspiciously unable to completely decipher the connection between the article and the pictures. "There has been increased Detnerat presence in lately. Not enough to draw suspicion, but enough to come to a few conclusions if you read more than what is between the lines. Isn't this the CEO of Detnerad in this picture? Inko inquired, pointing to a picture of a plain middle-aged man in a suit shaking hands with a blue-skinned woman in a picture. Yes, I would also like to believe that is him, not to mention the increased amount of organized villain raids as of late. And the villains who have quirk supremacist views all had support tech rivaling that of heroes, and all of these point towards Detnerad. Nizu explained with a voice that was a far cry from his usual chirpy voice. So, you're saying that Detnerad is supplying quirk supremacist groups with money and technology to fight heroes? Inko asked, dropping the pictures on the table. I would believe so. Can we? Inko asked, hopeful that the Hero Commission would put an end to the resurging MLA by performing a small-scale raid on Daika City. No, Nizu said as if he read her mind, dashing away any small shrill of hope within her. Detnerad is a support company that is worth trillions of yen and with a fortune worth of investment in foreign countries, such as China and the United States. Attacking them with a headfront strategy would put Japan's economy into jeopardy, and we may be risking the ire of the foreign countries by crippling Detnerad. So what can we do? Inko asked. There's nothing we can do now except gather a war council and keep our spies in Daika on the low, Nizu solemnly responded. You know, it's cracks like this in quirk laws that allowed organizations like this to form in the first place. Back when I was in America, everyone could use their quirk as they pleased, just as long as they don't hurt anyone with it or use it for vigilantism. Inko perked up, replying to Nizu's solemn statement. That is exactly why taking down the commission is next on my list right after the MLA, but regardless, it is only going to get harder going forward. Why do you say so? Inko inquired curiously. Their ideals. If they are a quirk supremacist group whose goal is to overthrow the government and authorize free quirk usage and nothing more, then they'd be much easier to deal with. But if they are a group charismatic enough to draw large amounts of people to their side while preaching about the shortcomings of the government. Nizu paused again to let things sink in for Inko to digest. It would plunge the country into a civil war which it is not ready for, while putting whoever comes out on top with an undesirable outcome. Either way, we can't let Japan plunge into another civil war. It would not be good for the overall stability of Japan in the long term. A long silence fell over them before Inko decided to speak up again. Anyway, moving on from that topic, I want to tell you that after this year I'd be resigning, Inko said while putting up her trademark smile. You'll what? Nizu asked, surprised by this revelation. I'll be resigning. My work schedule has grown too busy for poor Nidu to handle. Well, this is certainly shocking news, but I suppose it can't be helped, Nizu said, putting up his trademark smile again. How did you even manage your lofty schedules? Nizu wondered aloud. I guess having a good PA helped with that, and also but going on trips overseas with no fee charged while also having a profitable salary may have something to do with her agreeing to handle meetings on my behalf, but my schedule has become very hectic lately. Well then, at least you told me ahead of time, so by the time comes you'd submit your resignation letter to me, as well as announce your resignation to the students. Well, that seems simple enough, but if you'll excuse me now, I would like to take my leave, Inko said, standing up in preparation to leave. Of course you can leave. And with that, Inko walked towards the door, opened it, and walked out. When she was gone, Nizu went back to his paperwork, letting out a long sigh in the process. 10. Kendo and Izuku stood outside the faux building with Izuku putting the ear-comm device in his ear and Kendo trying to memorize the building's blueprints before she decided to break the silence between them. So, what's your business with explosive arse? Kendo asked while memorizing the building's blueprints, not even bothering to mask her dislike of Bakugo's behavior. Explosive arse? Izuku asked, shocked by the nickname, and Kendo simply shrugged before he decided to answer her. We were friends, Izuku simply said. You were friends with that guy? Kendo asked with her mouth open like that of a gaping fish. Like, I mean, that would explain why he calls you Deku and all, but what have you done to him that he hates your guts? Some perceived inferiority complex, I think, but we can still make this work in our favor, Izuku said thoughtfully. Bakugo hates my guts, and I am 100% sure he'd abandon the objective in a heartbeat just to pursue his vendetta with me. So you've got a plan? Kendo asked with her lips moving upwards into a smirk. Yup, but before I start, tell me more about your quirk. 10. So, that useless Deku thinks he can beat me because of his shitty-ass quirk? That bastard thinks he can look down on me. I'll show him. I'll be number one. So, do you have a plan in mind? Lita asked while checking out the bomb. Yeah, I got a plan all right. I'm going to take on that shitty nerd and teach him his place. I don't care what you do, just stay out of my way. Bakugo snarled at poor Lita. Bakugo-san, that is not a plan. If we don't plan, Midoriya-san and Kendo-san will outsmart us. Ida ranted on karate chopping the air, but of course, he was ignored by Bakugo, who was hellbent on taking Izuku on. While Katsuki was having his internal monologue, Lita was looking at his rage-filled face with worry. That wasn't the face of a hero, but he decided to ignore it in favor of moving the bomb. As soon as All Might announced the beginning, Bakugo plugged in his earpiece and used explosions to launch himself towards the entrance, not caring what his teammate did. Lita just looked after him in worry before resigning himself to his fate. 10. Bakugo was now walking, having decided that conserving strength was his best bet. He searched 3 stories so far, and yet no signs of Deku, and it was starting to piss him off. Constantly ready to blast something or someone on his way, he finally found his target. Izuku was at the end of a long hallway, standing with his hands in his pockets. As I predicted, you've come after me. I must congratulate you. King Explosion Murder, you took less time than I expected. He wasted 0 time responding, instead opting for a full-scale charge. Izuku's face remained the same, but Katsuki noticed the expression on his face. Something only someone who knew him well could. It was pure, unashamed smug. Like everything was according to plan. Katsuki feinted starting with a right hook, and then attacked with a left, but Izuku was already out of the way, executing a shoulder throw. Gotta admit, you surprised me, Katsuki. You usually start with a right. Trying to catch me off guard, weren't you? Bakugo, who was seeing red, only wanted to beat the ever-loving shit out of Deku. Shut up, you blindfolded bastard. He screamed and launched an explosion where Izuku's face was. But unfortunately for him, like the other times, the explosions failed to hit him. It just doesn't make sense, Bakugo whispered mostly to himself. Is Deku stronger than me? That just can't be possible. Bakugo, still having some combat sense left, knew his explosions weren't going to hit Izuku, decided to put some distance and continue firing explosions from range, hoping to overwhelm him. But Izuku plowed through the explosions before punching him in the gut. He doubled over in pain, and spittle was sent flying out his mouth as he barely prevented his soul from being ejected from his body. He was forced to retreat, holding his stomach as he could not take that kind of punch again. Damn it, how is he so fucking strong? And fast? How is he better than me? Katsuki was forced to weigh his options. But just then he received a signal that his gauntlets finished charging. A grin crept on his face. He just got a game changer. Alright, you shit-faced Deku. Think you're some hot shit now because you have your shitty barrier? I'd like to see it withstand this. He jumped backward to create some distance and prepared to pull the pin. Young Bakugo, cease this immediately. This could kill him, spoke All Might through his earpiece. Not if he moves, he smiled and pulled the pin. D. A humongous explosion rocked the entire building. Katsuki was squinting his eyes, but even he could see that Izuku had no intention to dodge. And that made Bakugo rethink the whole thing. Young Bakugo, if you use an attack of such magnitude again, I will stop the exercise and you will fail. All Might berated Bakugo, shouting at the top of his voice through the ear comms. Izuku stood there with a nonchalant expression written all over his face, but deep down he was annoyed. He could take Bakugo's mega explosions head on, but that would only put a dent in his grade, so he decided to do the most sensible, which was to minimize the explosions. Izuku raised his hands, and a faint blue energy enveloped it before he clenched his hands with the exception of his first finger into a fist. A blue ball of energy appeared on the tip of the Izuku's finger, swirling, compressing into itself, into a void of nothingness. Technique amplification lapse, blue. Izuku whispered, and his quirk responded by creating a void in space. Reality forced itself to correct by pulling in all surrounding matter. All the fiery explosions created by Bakugo decreased in scale and magnitude as Izuku's sphere absorbed it, increasing to the size of a baseball before Izuku stopped to look around. He had countered Bakugo's mega explosion, leaving the boy beyond dumbstruck as he stood there, although the whole hallway was severely burned and nearly everywhere was covered in soot and dust. "Is that all you can give me?" Bakugo's eyes bulged in disbelief at Izuku's words. But as the smoke dispersed, there he was, standing, with his arms in his pockets and no trace of an explosion where he stood. Katsuki was too shocked to even register the capture tape wrapping around him. But it is hard to ignore All Might, especially when he's screaming into your earpiece. Both villains are captured. The hero team wins. That knocked Bakugo out of his stupor. You were toying with me the entire time, weren't you?" Izuku stayed silent, but that silence spoke volumes. Katsuki felt rage bubbling inside him. He should be the winner. He should have murdered the shitty nerd. But if Deku truly was stronger than him, there was only one thing left to do. "You bastard. This is nothing more than a fluke. Yes, I am the number one. It doesn't matter how hard you train, Deku, because I'll still be head and shoulders above you. You hear me? It doesn't matter. Because no matter how high you climb, I'll always be above you. And I will climb even higher than you ever will. You hear me, Deku?" But as Katsuki turned towards his newly self-proclaimed rival, he was walking away, not even caring. "Stop ignoring me, asshole," Bakugo screamed before promptly falling into the bliss of unconsciousness. "Midoriya, what the hell happened down here?" The voice of Kendo shouted from the hallway as she ran to meet Izuku stopping and standing above Bakugo's captured form. "Kendo," he asked in confusion, "I thought you were looking for the bomb." "I already captured the bomb when I felt that massive explosion, and I figured you might need help," she frantically reasoned. "Well, you came at the right time. Everything on my side went according to plan," Izuku explained as he flashed a grin at Bakugo's unconscious form lying on the ground. "I take it my plan worked perfectly?" Izuku asked. "Yeah, but I was only that fast in defeating Lita because..." 10. Flashback. A few minutes earlier. Ida, who had given up on communicating with Bakugo, stood admiring the texture of the bomb as he watched intently for any movement while ranting on about the gall of Bakugo's behavior. "What a mouthy miscreant. He refused to work with me, and he expects me to guard the bomb by myself? If Midoriya-san comes here, I cannot get past his infinity, nor can I defend and attack at the same time." Lita ranted on, but unknown to him, Kendo stood behind a pillar listening to him. "And now because of him our chances of success are low," Lita finished before taking a deep breath to motivate himself again. Tenya Lita, the heir to the Lita family and future Ingenium, should not be caught moping around just because of an uncooperative teammate. I will go beyond and overcome all obstacles sent my way. They were supposed to be heinous villains, right? Maybe I should embrace my villainous side. Ida hummed thoughtfully. Right, that's it. I must embrace my inner villainy. Yes, I shall be the epitome of evil. Wahaha. Uffed. Ida, blushing with embarrassment underneath his helmet, snapped his head towards the entrance. He had forgotten to keep his attention towards the entrance. "Who goes there? Reveal yourself." Kendo, fighting her laughter, walked from behind a pillar. "Dude, we all know it's you. There's no need to put on that cringe act of villainy." Kendo managed to wheeze out between bouts of laughter. "Stop laughing. I am evil," Ida insisted. That seemed to make Kendo roll her eyes, laughing. Ida felt an eyebrow twitch at that. Maybe he had to do something only a villain would do. But what? Oh, right, it was time for a monologue. He could get some time if he did that, right? Haha. Laugh to your heart's content, hero, but you won't stop me. For you see, I have prepared myself for this very encounter. I have removed any objects that may have served against me. Moreover, this room was strategically chosen to maximize my movement. Ida boasted. Thankfully, Kendo simply stood there, watching. Ida raised an eyebrow. Why wasn't she running at him? It all looked like a distraction. Cautiously, he paced around, looking behind the pillars of a bare gray room. Where is Midoriya? He wondered. He is distracting Bakugo, Kendo innocently replied. Before Lita could go on a monologue again, Kendo jumped at him and expanded her fists 3 times her body size before doing a backflip midair. And just as Lita was about to carry the bomb away laughing, what seemed like a giant earthquake rocked the building, and Kendo, who was midair, fell with a loud thud. But Lita, who was on the ground when it happened, was rattled and fell to the ground seemingly in a daze, leaving the bomb unguarded, and that was Kendo's cue to wrap the capture tape around his legs. All Might's voice rang through the comms shouting, "Both villains are captured. The hero team wins." Kendo then walked up to Lita before offering him a hand, which he humbly accepted. "Nice showing. But in all honesty, you just got the short straw when it came to partners today." "You two had a nice showing, Kendo-san. If not for that mini earthquake, I would not have been bested so easily. But I promise, next time we will have a proper fight, and I will defeat you," Ida proclaimed to Kendo, who just stood with a blank face. "Sure, but don't complain when I kick your butt," she said before jogging away while Lita stood muttering something to himself. Flashback end. 10. The rest of the class was left to make sense of the supernatural ass-whooping they had just witnessed. The blindfolded guy had just beat the piss out of the explosive jerk, and the explosive jerk may have tried to murder the other. And, in the end, the winner was still the guy who was blindfolded. The control room was silent. The entire class, teacher included, could only stare at the screen, mouths agape. None moved a muscle until All Might snapped out of it and sprung into action, leaping out of the room and toward the building to collect Bakugo. Holy shit! Class 1A was in complete uproar over the outcome of the first battle trial. Tears of excitement leaked out from Kaminari's eyes. "He beat him. He really beat him. That was so fucking epic," proclaimed Mina. "It was absolutely dazzling." Take a guess at which student said this. "Most impressive," concluded Tokoyami. "Is this guy even on our level?" Kami asked, shock evident in her tone. 10. Izuku walked back to the observation room, while Kendo recounted what happened between her and Lita. "So after he fell, I wrapped him up with capture tape and waited for a minute or two. After that, All Might announced the end of the exercise." Kendo finished telling her side of the story, ending it right as they walked back into the observation room. All Might decided to interrupt the chattering Class 1A after sending Bakugo to the nurse. He was planning on giving a very harsh lecture and punishment to him when he regained consciousness, but in the meantime decided to ask their opinion on what they just watched. "Now, can anyone tell me who was the MVP in this battle?" Yaoyorozu was the first to raise her hand. That would obviously be Midoriya. He used his knowledge of his opponent's personality and quirk to devise a perfect plan. He knew Bakugo would go after him, while Lita would be more rational and protect the bomb. He was aware that his quirk could get past his trap, so he devised a simple plan that was effective enough to catch his opponent off guard. And while he was taunting Bakugo during their battle, he distracted him for long enough for his partner to incapacitate Lita, however unconventionally it was. Pretty much all of Class 1A went along with Momo, as from what they witnessed, Izuku was the one who made the whole plan that ensured the defeat of Bakugo and Lita. Meanwhile, All Might's sweat dropped. "My goodness," she said, "even more than I was planning to. Just how smart are these kids?" But he said it out loud, praising Momo for her observation skills while she blushed bashfully. He then sent the next group, while the rest prepared to observe their battle. Although, young Midoriya, All Might started, only to sigh with disappointment. "Why is your quirk registry so lacking in details? It is truly shameful you dared to venture into a fight, ready to use your quirk against your classmates, without even providing sufficient warning to the faculty. As a teacher, I need to assess potential risks for such delicate exercises." Izuku knew why his quirk registry was as vague as possible, only listing space manipulation and giving as little details of it, leaving whoever was looking at it to go theorize and figure out the full extent of its quirk. Although, if your quirk is what I think it is, you could have ended the battle before it even began. Why did you choose to drag it out using your quirk as little as possible? As a result of this, I would deduct points from you, not enough to fail, but to serve as a warning for next time. All Might finished his assessment before turning to the observation screen. But All Might's criticism about dragging out the fight was 100% true. He could have used Lapse Blue to pull Bakugo towards him before knocking him out, but no. He just had to let the fight get to that level for no apparent reason. Izuku sighed, taking All Might's criticism to heart. Momo walked to him before putting a hand on his shoulder and offering words of encouragement. I still think you did great, Izuku, but we just have to learn from our mistakes. It's why we are here after all. Thanks, Momo, was all Izuku could manage before he turned his attention to the observation screen. Chapter 8. Calm Before the Storm. Bakugo felt like utter crap. He had a killer headache and his body was as sore as all hell, but the real casualty was his pride. His pride had been beaten, flogged, and covered in shit and piss before being paraded through the public square for the shits and giggles. In other words, he was not feeling good, physically or emotionally. He had been nothing short of embarrassed in the battle trial by Deku. He couldn't land a single blow on Deku when he was using his quirk. Deku easily countered his attack and put him on his ass again, even when he wasn't using his quirk. Deku danced around him and put him in his place, and he made it look easy while he was doing it. And his last words insinuated that he was nothing but a warm-up. That fucking hurt. Not only did Deku surpass him over the past 5 years, but he wasn't even second to the fuckhead. He wasn't even sure if he was third. Who fully know what Big Tits was capable of when shit got serious? He winced, and his hand went up to cradle his stomach. He had no idea what the hell hit him, but it left him with the worst stomach ache he had ever experienced. It was the maraschino cherry on top of the horseshit sundae of the day. How's your gut, young man? The voice of an old lady piped up beside his bed. It feels like shit, he murmured. I'm not surprised, she remarked. Getting the equivalent of a golf ball slammed into your gut will do that to you. Recovery Girl remarked sarcastically. He growled as he remembered the beatdown he had received at Deku's hands. You don't get to be bitter, boy, she scolded before walking and plopping down on her seat. Just look at what you did to the training ground today, she said before bringing up a picture on her computer showing a picture of a severely burnt hallway causing Bakugo's eyes to widen in slight shock. I'd have ripped you a new one for your comical level of recklessness that could have gotten yourself and others killed or seriously hurt. But someone else is waiting outside to speak to you first, and anything I say would either be redundant or much nicer than what you're about to get. Recovery Girl huffed before turning back to her computer screen. Who the hell wants to talk to me? He muttered lowly to no one in particular. I do. A voice called behind him, and he turned as he saw All Might in all his valor looking down at him literally, and he was not smiling. In a very slow manner, All Might turned to face Bakugo before speaking in a very harsh tone that showed barely restrained anger. Now, young Bakugo, All Might said, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I screw up. Bakugo scoffed. I know what I did wrong. Do you now? All Might wondered, arching an eyebrow. I'm listening. Bakugo remained quiet. Then allow me to list your many failures in this exercise. All Might's usually candid tone took a terrifying harsh edge that made Bakugo stare at the man with apprehension. First, you didn't just ignore a teammate. You abandoned him outright, refusing to listen to his many pleas for cooperation. And even when you were backed into a corner, you avoided any attempts at communication with young Ida. What would have happened had you missed the hero team altogether? Would you have been wandering around or waiting for them to casually pass by you? Bakugo scowled but said nothing. Second, in your arrogance, you severely underestimated your opponents. Worse yet, you lost sight of your mission due to some sense of personal vendetta or battle lust. Young Midoriya played you like a fiddle. Once he used his quirk, the battle was put to rest. I do not know what you wanted to prove, but battles aren't always won by brutality alone. Bakugo hissed, baring his teeth, and clenched his fists in anger. However, he kept his head down. Thirdly, I am appalled at your lack of restraint. I did not miss the fact you aimed straight to young Midoriya's head in your initial engagement. Bakugo simply grimaced at the memory. Had young Midoriya not acted in time, I fear what might have happened. I wasn't going to kill him. Bakugo snarled. No, but such a strong explosion, to the face and at such close range, could have given him a concussion, at the very least, and a broken neck or a scar to the face at worst. As miraculous as Recovery Girl's quirk is, that does not excuse such apathy towards your classmates' health. I must say, I never expected to witness such violence as you displayed against young Midoriya. All Might continued. You had more than one chance to strategize and use your quirk to maximum efficiency, but instead chose to use your quirk to inflict damage. That is truly reprehensible. All Might pointedly looked at the explosive teenager. Said boy, though, decided to growl at the floor and keep his hands in his pockets. As much as Bakugo tried to give off a dismissive aura, All Might could tell he was on the brink of exploding. Because the building wasn't brought down by the explosion and no one was ultimately hurt, and the rest of the class was able to continue, just in a different building. That was your only saving grace. But you still knowingly tried to commit grievous bodily harm on fellow students during a training exercise, successful or not. This conversation is only happening right now because of Midoriya sensibly deciding to reduce the damage caused by your cataclysmic explosion, and the fact that this is your first training exercise just saved you from a one-way ticket to the villain rehabilitation program at Ketsubutsu Academy. Oh, was all he could say in response. And from now on, you'll be sitting out every heroics class until the sports festival at the bare minimum. And you'll be on a probationary period for the rest of the semester in which you will be seeing Hound Dog for compulsory therapy, likely for the foreseeable future. If you do something like this again, even the slightest misstep, and you'll be lucky to land in general studies. Bakugo felt his stomach plummet to the depths of his sphincter at his punishment, combined with the Antarctic glare he was receiving. After finishing his rant, All Might decided to leave him with some parting words to remember. A hero, no matter how powerful, should always think of how best to use their powers to save people. And with that said, All Might gave him one last pointed look and left, leaving Bakugo to think over some things. 10. Izuku hummed an unknown tune as he weaved through the halls of UA with ease, and he mentally recounted what he knew of his classmates so far. Mina was too cheerful and didn't know the meaning of personal space. Lita acted like someone with a giant stick up his ass. No surprise there. Kirishima always went on and on about his manly crap and also didn't know the meaning of personal space. Kami went out of her way to speak in that ridiculous teenage accent, and Katsuki was, well, Katsuki. Now, if anyone told Izuku that he'd be having such a low opinion of his classmates about 6 years ago, he'd have laughed in the person's face. After all, he was the same person who was able to keep toxic people like Bakugo at his side, but as his mother's affluence grew over the years, he met many people who only wanted to be friends with him because he was handsome, rich, or just wanted to deride and worship him, and as a result became disgusted, cutting off friends, and at a point in his life Izuku could say he was much colder than Shoto ever could. It was only recently thanks to his mother that his social skills started to perk up, and even then, he'd sometimes lose control and coldly dismiss or ignore his classmates. His first conversation with Uraraka is a prime example. And that was one of the major reasons why he was friends with Momo. Not only was she beautiful, but she also didn't have any tics that would drive a person off, and despite the fact she was from an affluent family, she didn't have the typical snobbish, stuck-up attitude you'd expect from someone of her caliber, and the fact they both had the same background, both being from a rich family, and wanting people to like them for who they are and not what they have. They became instant friends, and the fact that she was beautiful and smart was definitely a bonus. Shaking himself out of his musings, he adjusted his blindfold as he began to remember what happened at the gate. Now, Izuku was by no means someone who could be easily agitated. Even Katsuki's shenanigans became something he could barely call a minor inconvenience. But what he really hated was being the center of attention. And since he made it a point to always be early, he got the full brunt of the reporters, preying on All Might in front of the UA entrance. He was swarmed with questions about All Might's teaching methods and other less relevant questions. Thanks to his quick thinking, he rebounded them by telling them he was from General Ed, and they abandoned him like he was contagious. 10. It was a new refreshing day and UA and Aizawa looked as tired and grumpy as ever. Did he even sleep? The students, traumatized from the first day, silently watched, waiting for their teacher to begin the day. Instead of speaking, though, the man took a moment to critically eye every single one of them. Something important was about to go down. The students gulped. Did it have to do with their performance the day before? All of them took a look at each other and were relieved that they weren't suffering alone. Mineta and Kaminari looked close to a panic attack. Uraraka bit her fingernails. Ida and Yaoyorozu stiffly stared at their teacher, trying to keep composed faces. Izuku, well, just kept a neutral face, although due to his blindfold, it was hard to tell what he was thinking sometimes. Everyone awaited with bated breaths. Was anyone going to be expelled? Had he found any of them unworthy to continue? The suspense was driving them mad. "Morning, everyone," Aizawa finally said, yawning. "I went over the footage of yesterday's battle trial. Allow me to say." He trailed off, squinting at his pupils and making his students' attention directed at him with trepidation. "You all did well." He finally finished with his usual lazy tone. Class 1A blankly stared at their homeroom teacher. They did? They all thought in perfect unison. Truthfully, they had expected some harsher words than that. "It was your first attempt at a hero-villain battle, so I can't say I had any expectations to begin with," Aizawa shrugged. "Otherwise, I would have expelled half of you based on yesterday's ridiculous displays of stupidity, negligence, arrogance, and sheer irrationality, while sending the rest to general studies." The class sweat dropped. Now that was the Aizawa they had come to know. "I have a few pointers for each of you, but that will have to wait." He leaned forward, squinting at them. "There is something of utmost importance to do first." His tone turned almost threatening. "Something that will affect your future in UA while you don't fail to meet my expectations." "Oh no, this is bad." Nearly all the students mentally chorused. What could it possibly be? An expulsion? Another test? "Oh please, not another test. You have to pick a class representative and vice representative," Aizawa informed them. Everyone stared at their homeroom teacher, baffled. "That's it. God damn it. Why did he have to make it so suspenseful? I don't care how you do it. Just get it done before your first class," Aizawa declared. He yawned before adding, "With that said, I'll go to sleep." He stood up and, unrolling a sleeping bag he had under the teacher's desk, tucked in. His students couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Izuku, in the meantime, frowned and started thinking. As he ignored his classmates' energetic antics, he pondered on their options. "So how will we decide?" "Voting," Kyoka asked. "Forget it, extras," Bakugo proclaimed, standing on his desk and making mini explosions. "I declare myself class representative." "But we barely know each other," Ribbit, Azui said, ignoring Bakugo, who suddenly went back to sulking in his seat. Izuku listened to his class collectively attempt to decide how to go about selecting a representative for about half a second before his brain moved on to other things. Whatever shit he predicted that Bakugo would be in must have been rather severe for him to be so docile. It was pretty disconcerting if he was being honest. "I don't know. I think we know enough of everyone, right?" Sato tentatively added. "Does anyone know what are the responsibilities involved with being class representative?" Yaoyorozu tentatively asked, sounding uncertain. "I have no idea, but it sure sounds manly," Kirishima commented. He did, however, frown and scratch his head. Does they even do anything, or is it just some title? In MY administration, girls would have to show at least 30 centimeters of thigh. The grape-haired boy Mineta spoke up, but he was ignored by everybody except some girls who gave him quizzical and disgusted looks. "I think he or she has to deal with any events, help organize stuff, and other stuff, I think. Never had one in my middle school," Zero answered. "It sounds fun. Pick me. Pick me," Ashido exclaimed, and with that, the class descended into an indiscernible squabble. Mina's cheerful antics made Izuku return to the real world as he witnessed Lita stand up from his seat before marching to the front of the class in Lita-typical fashion and slamming his hands on Aizawa's table to get their attention. Aizawa perked up from his sleeping bag to see who had disturbed his sleep before his eyes landed on Lita, who looked at him bashfully. Glaring at him, Lita shrank under his gaze laced with killing intent before Aizawa suddenly broke his gaze and returned to his sleeping bag, but not before giving Lita a look that promised unfold suffering if he disturbed his sleep again. Turning back to his classmates, Lita spoke up. "As a premier school, I expect us to handle things like this in a more simple and civilized way, which is why I propose the notion of voting for your candidates." Ida finished his little speech as the class quietly began to murmur. "But won't everybody just vote themselves?" Itsuka asked. "Probably," Ida shrugged before continuing, "which is why the person at the top with multiple votes would be class rep and runner-up would be assistant." "Sounds good to me," Jiro shrugged. Soon enough, Papers were disturbed and a ballot box was placed for people to write their desired candidate and place it in the ballot box. His attention returned when a slip of paper was placed on his desk, and it occurred to him that they must have been voting for class rep. It was a strange way to go about it. He figured that most of the class would vote for themselves given that most barely knew each other, so any winner would be whoever ended up with about 2 or 3 votes total. He didn't care one way or the other. He did have to take some time to decide who to vote for, though. His immediate thought was Ida, as he looked to be the most passionate about the position and would most definitely treat it the most seriously out of everyone there, himself included. However, that may be the exact issue. He was way too serious about mundane things, and it could be off-putting for many. His next thought was Momo, and he couldn't find any fault with that choice. She was exceptionally smart and probably the most responsible of the class. Even if she wasn't elected to be class rep, she'd almost certainly wind up being vice rep and still bring a ton of value to the role. He put a pin in it and moved on. And even though he didn't know Kendo that well, he saw that she acted in a big sister role to the class and would also make a great class rep, as her ability to get along with others without looking aloof or like a goofball would come in handy. However, his familiarity with Momo made him conclude quickly. Ochako was bubbly and looked like a person who wouldn't let anything ruin her day no matter how bad. But she would be the first to admit that being a class rep wasn't really her thing, and she'd probably punch anyone voting for her. Shoji was cool, but he didn't think the taller boy would want the position given his aloof demeanor. He was confident Cammy would OMG any issue presented to her, so she wasn't an option. Shoto. What a waste of time, he heard the bicolored boy mutter to himself. Izuku quickly moved on from that thought and wrote Momo's name onto the ballot before placing it in the box. When all the votes were cast, Ito went to the board to tally the results. Momo's name received 5 tallies pretty early on, which he was expecting. He was expecting to see Kendo's name receive a tally, so he wrote it off. Then she got another, but he wasn't particularly concerned. Then, she got a third, and then she got a fourth. Pretty soon, she was up to 9. What the fuck? Izuku heard her absent-mindedly mutter. In the end, Kendo led the pack with 14 votes. Momo trailed in second place with 5, and Lita had a single vote. Izuku and Kendo were rendered speechless, and she remained speechless even after Aizawa confirmed the decision, and the rest of the day proceeded as normal. Lita, meanwhile, was looking like someone who suffered severe constipation and congratulated Kendo before walking back to his seat speechlessly. Poor Lita. 10. Throughout the rest of the day, Kendo was looking very thoughtful. Her crankiness rose even further since everyone was congratulating her on her position, which she did not even want, and it seemed, even teachers were only asking her questions. Teenager stuff. It wasn't until lunch that she finally got some alone time. But that went down the drain after Ishido sat down next to her. And of course, Yorozu, following her, sat down opposite her. Kendo continued to eat her food wordlessly as she recounted the day's events. And even though she wasn't wet behind the ears when it came to a responsibility such as that, it still felt disconcerting, honestly. She was brought out of her thoughts when she saw Mina poking her lobster with a chopstick. Slapping her hands away and sending a scathing glare was more than enough to get the girl off her back. She looked and saw Yorozu. Yayayozu? Whatever her name, started with a Y and ended with a U, staring at her warmly. Seemed to be having a problem, Kendo-san? Well, yeah, I just didn't expect to be voted class rep. I understand, but I feel that you'd be a good one, Momo said, trying to cheer her up, but Kendo saw right through her act. Are you just saying this to cheer me up? You don't even know me. Perhaps, but I know you would be a good class rep because your easygoing aura is enough to handle class rep duties. Kendo snorted. You sound like someone with experience. Well, I was class rep throughout my junior high school years, Momo replied sheepishly, trying not to sound arrogant. She even has more experience than me in the role, Kendo thought with wide eyes. Thanks for the talk, Em. Kendo blushed bashfully, looking at a snickering Ishido for answers. Yayorozu, Momo replied. Well, I think that's enough of your class rep bullshit. Who cares about class rep? I never had one in my middle school, Mina replied, shrugging. I heard such activities give you leadership experience, Ishido-san. What's with the san? I'm feeling like my mom now, Yamamo. Mina said in a mock-hurt voice. What, Yamamoto? Come on, Ishido. Kendo said, about to start scolding her until Momo spoke up. It's fine, Kendo sa-. Momo said, stopping herself from saying san again. I like the nickname. Momo said, going back to eating her food. Yeah, seriously, Yamamoto, your surname is a tongue twister. Mina said, pouting from the murderous glare she was getting from Kendo. It's fine. Yamamoto is fine with me, Momo said with a sigh, somehow not taking offense to what Ishido said. Momo, Kendo, and Ishido continued to eat their food without speaking to each other, but then Momo saw Izuku holding his tray of food going to sit in a separate place with Uraraka and Lita following him. He seemed to be doing his best to avoid them and tune out Lita's rant, but Lita and Uraraka just kept on following him despite the fact he was going in a zigzag fashion, not wanting to sit down with them, and judging from the little facial expression that she could see he looked irritated. It seemed whatever Lita was saying was really annoying him. Hey, Izuku, come sit here, Momo called out, patting the empty seat beside her. He came and offered a small greeting of acknowledgement to Kendo, and she responded in kind before sitting down. Can we sit here? Achiko and Lita asked at the same time, to which Momo and Kendo simply hand-waved, telling them it was okay. Achiko sat beside Izuku, and Ilda went to sit beside Ishido. Izuku sighed. Now he was sandwiched between two girls. So, Madam President, who did you vote? Achiko asked with a teasing smirk. Izuku could practically feel Kendo cringe at the nickname. I voted for Midoriya here, Kendo simply replied in a clipped tone. It seemed Momo's motivational speech didn't do shit. Me too. Well, I voted for Ida first, since he seemed right for the job, glasses and all. But in the second vote, I decided to go with you since you were the one to devise a plan to capture Lita and Bakugo. That's gotta mean you're smart, right? Said Uraraka. Ida looked strangely, before adding his 2 cents. It's quite unfortunate that you did not win. I was rooting for you, Izuku, Momo said, but didn't notice Achiko and Ishido perk up at the use of first name for Izuku. That goodness that I didn't win. I hate the role of class rep, actually, Izuku said, making Kendo and Achiko gasp in shock. I did not know this made you unhappy. I humbly apologize for voting for you, Kendo said with a slight bow. Izuku waved it off, digging into his fried rice, while Achiko looked at Ida curiously. I voted for myself, actually, for the first time, but for the second time I voted yes, Lita said, causing all of them except Izuku to stare on in shock. I thought myself perfect for the role, but in middle school, I always lost to Yorosen here for some reason. He finished somberly, but instead of looks of pity or sympathy, nearly everyone just gave him a blank look that said, with that giant stick up your ass, it's no wonder you lost to Yaoyorozu. Achiko tried to console him, but Izuku just continued to eat his fried rice while thinking, maybe one day, Lita, one day. Ida, the way you talk. Are you a rich kid? Ida looked slightly embarrassed by Achiko's sudden question, but Izuku answered for him, without even looking away from his fried rice. Kendo slapped her face in exasperation. Damn, some people just said whatever came to mind, didn't they? His last name is the same as Hero Ingenium, a pretty famous hero who operates in Tokyo and employs 65 sidekicks. Both have the same quirk as the past members of the Ida family. Based on his and Ingenium's age, he must be his brother. Am I wrong? Izuku asked with a noticeable smirk. Ida looked gobsmacked. Midoriya has just told everything he was planning to say and more. Achiko also looked surprised, but didn't say anything as she was now looking at Lita with newfound awe. Ida tried to say something, but was interrupted by the screeching sound of an alarm. Level 3 security has been breached. All students evacuate in an orderly fashion. All hell broke loose. All of the students immediately panicked, completely disregarding the ending statement. Achiko was about to be swarmed over. She closed her eyes in terror, until she felt someone touch her palm and swing her on their back. When she opened her eyes, she saw the familiar green hair of Izuku, while he was still holding onto his fried rice. You think that you should be eating right now? She yelled in his ear. Izuku just looked at her with mild agitation in a rare show of emotion. It's a waste of good food, and how do you expect me to eat in all this noise? Yeah, I'd expect these people to act more civilized and rational. They're in UA, aren't they supposed to be smart? A person is smart. People are dumb, Izuku said sagely. Both cringed from a particularly loud screech. Izuku frowned. Kendo meanwhile had enough of it. Midoriya-kun, you can fly right. Please get me to the front towards the exit so that we can try to calm down the crowd. Izuku complied and grabbed Kendo by the waist before flying across the cafeteria toward where the exit was. As they passed by the windows, they saw Ida shouting and pointing outside. They all looked out on the main yard. There they saw reporters surrounding Eraserhead and Present Mike like vultures, demanding to see All Might, or at least get a statement. So handsome, Kendo thought dreamily with a blush as she looked at him dreamily with the thoughts of what his eyes looked like, without his blindfold clouding her thoughts along with the expensive cologne he wore that she greedily took whiffs of. Are you okay, Kendo? Midoriya asked while looking at Kendo, who was looking at him with a blush on her face. Yeah, I'm okay, Kendo said while trying to avert her eyes away from his face. Damn it, it's just the press. Kendo looked around, trying to distract herself from Midoriya by thinking of a plan. She just decided to be direct and blunt. They arrived above the entrance, and when he dropped her, she screamed at the top of her voice. Everyone, shut the fuck up and get your shit together. Achiko and the others looked at her, that was hearing her raise her voice, and the second for the language she used. After she got everyone's attention, she continued. It is just the press. We are UA students, for God's sake, so let's act like we belong here. Help the trampled, and evacuate to the designated spot. Students looked around, some embarrassed, some feeling guilty, but all prepared to help, not even caring that their junior was scolding them. Together, they got injured students to Recovery Girl while the rest evacuated. But while Midoriya and Kendo took control of the situation in the cafeteria, Nizu and some other teachers looked at their UA barrier, crumbled into a pile of dust. Who do you think could have done this? Asked Snipe, already knowing it couldn't have been one of the reporters. I don't know, said Nizu. It most probably was a hoodlum or a villain. Either way, this should be a wake-up call to all of us to improve our security. But I still worry about what it could mean. Could it be a simple act of violence? Or a declaration of war? His words left everyone feeling troubled, while the police arrived to take the press off campus. 10. After going to class, Izuku's only problems came from looking Midnight in the eye, thanks to how many times he appreciated her. Thank God he always covered his eyes. Some boys had similar problems, and only Mineta declared modern hero art history to be his favorite subject. What made it worse was Midnight's knowing glint as she stared at them. It made Izuku feel like she knew more. Much, much more. After the regular classes, which left many of the boys with severe nosebleeds, Aizawa came inside and began to address them, not knowing about their problem or not giving a damn, although knowing Aizawa, it was most likely the latter. What you saw today is what happens when people let their instincts take over. People panic. You, as the future heroes, must learn to suppress that panic and act according to the situation. Kendo, the orange-haired student in question, looked at their teacher. You reacted well and took care of the situation. Good job. But next time, watch the language. Kendo nodded, but still kept her emotionless look even as others praised her, although a bit of embarrassment could be seen in her eyes. Now, would be the time for you to go home, but I did say I have a few pointers for you earlier, so first Kendo, Midoriya, Lita, and Bakugo, please meet me in the teacher's lounge, and students remember, tomorrow we have a special class in the afternoon. Dismissed. 10. Please sit, Aizawa ordered. Midoriya and Kendo gulped, looking around. They were in a side room, sitting on opposite sofas. Just where were they? Tentatively, Kendo examined the room and saw Izuku sitting with his legs crossed and arms folded while having an emotionless expression on his face. Outside, Bakugo and Lita patiently waited for their turn with Aizawa. Let me just say, you truly are a problem child, Aizawa tiredly sighed. He leaned back, exhausted. On one hand, he held a mug of steaming coffee. Midoriya and Kendo did not miss the files on his lap. Tell me, Midoriya, why didn't you update your quirk registry? Being vague is different from being up to date, sir, Izuku said, while still keeping a neutral face. And may I know the reason why your quirk details are so vague? Aizawa replied in a clipped tone with a hint of irritation. I'm still discovering the full extent of my quirk, sir, and once I do, I will put more details in my registry. Please do. The last thing we need is an unpredictable wildcard among us whose quirk is potentially a danger to all of us. Aizawa said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. I will, sir, Izuku replied. Anyway, to get to the main issue, which was your team's abysmal performance, which was slightly better than Bakugo's team. First of all, Midoriya, you should have taken the shot when you had the chance, Aizawa said with a devilish smirk spreading across his face. Izuku in question simply looked down in shame. Aizawa stared silently at Midoriya and Kendo for a full minute before voicing his thoughts again. The rest of the class may or may not know this, but it's clear that Pomeranian here holds a grudge against you, right? Before the match began, Midoriya there knows that better than anyone, correct? Yeah, so what? That doesn't. You knew from the very beginning that a villain with a vendetta against you would be coming for you. Though, I must give you full points for confronting him instead of running. Why did you choose to taunt him instead of ending it as fast as you could? I saw what your quirk could do, and I know you could have ended the fight effectively before it even began, and your actions fueled his anger and frustration even more. Don't even get me started on the possibility of civilians who would have gotten caught up in the villain's pursuit. Izuku suddenly flinched. The moment you lose sight of such a destructive villain, you put everyone, heroes and civilians, around you at risk. Your proper course of action should have been to lure and capture. Instead of taunting and letting him blindly attack his surroundings to hit you, lure him away, either to a location where you can take advantage of the terrain or somewhere secure, preferably up given that he uses explosives. And seeing the damage caused by Bakugo, it very well could have been a catastrophe had it not been a training exercise. Aizawa finished his rant, rubbing his temples in exasperation. And you, Kendo, please take exercises like this more seriously. Since Ida had no intention of leaving the bomb alone and your quirk is only effective at a close range, the only way Team A could have won is by sneaking up on the villains. That match could have been decided the moment Kendo's presence was noticed. Moreover, your team's communication was in disarray. Ida had no idea whether both heroes were being held back by Bakugo or was it just Midoriya. Letting her location out was a major error on her part. With that said, I expect these flaws to be improved upon with time as future heroes. Dismissed. Midoriya and Kendo both stood up thanking Aizawa before leaving, and upon leaving, saw Bakugo and Lita standing outside. Izuku locked eyes with Bakugo for a second before averting his gaze, to which Bakugo simply huffed. 10. Seeing as the school was called off for the rest of the day, all the students began to commute to their homes or went to hang out with their friends. Ochiko and Tinya met on their way home and tried to find Izuku, but to no avail. They figured that Bakugo should know where he went. They seemed to know each other quite well. Finding the explosive teen was the easy part. They just needed to listen for insults and cursing, and voila, there was Bakugo, already looking ready to murder someone. Talking to him, however. What the fuck do you want? Round face, four eyes? He asked them. We were wondering whether you knew where Midoriya was? Asked Uraraka quickly before Ida could discuss Bakugo's tone. Do I look like Deka's bodyguard or something? Bakugo asked in an irritated tone. No, that was just a side question. By the way, would you want to hang out with all of us during the weekend? Lita asked, already anticipating the answer. I got things to do. Ain't got time for stupid shit like that. Bakugo replied before he started walking away with his hands in his pockets before he stopped and turned back to glare at them. Oh, and by the way, next time you got questions about Deka, don't come asking me. I haven't hung out with that nerd since I was 5, so I wouldn't know jack shit about him. Our mums meet on occasion, but that's it. He walked away, leaving them in an empty hallway. Ochiko tried to not let the disappointment show on her face, but Ida knew better. That was honestly better than I thought, Ochiko said, breaking the silence. 10. In a faraway, secluded bar, an odd man who appeared made to be made of black mist worked diligently cleaning glass after glass. It seemed like the one thing he spent his days doing. Opposite him, across the bar's counter, sat a young man with unkempt, ashy white hair. He drank what looked like liquor, downing it in one shot, all too happy with whatever he was doing. All of a sudden, there was a beep and both bartender and young man turned their heads to his side. There, a small screen revealed that they were receiving a call. "Master," chorused the bartender and young man. "Hirojiri, Tamura, how has it been?" said a calm, collected voice from the other end. "Excellent, master. I just need a bit more time," said Tamura Shigaraki, all while smiling at the computer screen while taking his drink. "But that's to be expected, isn't it?" The man on the other end hummed thoughtfully. "Tomorrow will be instrumental for this plan of yours, Tamura. It will determine the future," the voice stated matter-of-factly. "Everything is in place, master. Overhaul and his band of Yakuza have agreed to inconspicuously work with us, supplying us trigger and goons in exchange for money, bolstering our ranks of expendables. Jiren has acquired high-ranking minions and weapons to deliver next week. I won't fail you, master," promised Shigaraki with a wide smirk. "Do not fear failure, Tamura," softly said the voice. "No matter how prepared you are, never underestimate a hero's ability to mess with your schemes. Learn from this experience and grow from it." Shigaraki simply muttered under his breath. "I am proud of what you have done so far, Tamura," the man said with a reassuring voice. "You've grown into quite the capable individual. Just you wait, master. Once I kill All Might, I will restore you to your former glory," Tamura said, his smirk widening even more. "We'll see about that," hummed the man. And just like that, the line was cut and Shigaraki was cut off from his master. The young villain seemed displeased by what he felt was a lack of faith in his abilities. "Worry not, Shigaraki," Hirojiri reassured. "The master is both proud and pleased." "Oh, he will be even more soon enough," said Shigaraki, now grinning like a maniac. Hirojiri merely nodded and went back to cleaning glasses like any other normal bartender. Shigaraki got off his stool, humming happily a merry tune. Hirojiri paused on his work and turned towards the departing young man. "Will you be in your room, playing games for the rest of your day, Shigaraki?" Hirojiri politely asked. "What do you mean, Hirojiri?" said Shigaraki, turning around to show that crazy, creepy grin of his. "No stupid computer or console game will do right now." For one reason or another, Shigaraki broke into a euphoric cackle. A far greater game is about to begin.